Blue Dragon Emperor, Lord of Thunder. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51. Happy People, Disappearing People. Long N flew over the territory, and the clansmen who were cutting down trees, leveling the land, and building houses all knelt down and chanted his name, the Lord of Storms. Most of these clansmen were goblins, but there were also half-beast races such as gnolls, wild boars, and spotted cats. They were all uncivilized savages, and most of them had a difficult and dangerous life. A tribe even had only 20 to 30 clansmen or less. They had no objection to becoming Long N's clansmen. They had been living a precarious life, and becoming a clan of a real dragon was a shelter for them. Maybe the real dragon would eat some of them, but not necessarily themselves. They came to this land with the idea of competing with others for luck, but what greeted them was food that could fill them up, and even a shelter from the wind and rain. Dillidus got up from the ground and looked up at the huge and majestic figure in the sky flying away. It was not until her pupils shrank and she could no longer see the shadow in the sky that she struggled to carry the wooden board she had just put down. When she knelt down, her amber eyes sparkled as she looked at the sky, because she knew that was their master, a powerful and majestic real dragon. Not only did he not eat them, but he also gave them a safe place to live and enough food to fill their stomachs. As a weak tabby cat, Dillidus had lived in hunger and anxiety since childhood. Tabby cats do not have strong bodies and powerful strength, nor are their claws and fangs sharp. Only their agile speed and excellent perception have allowed them to survive to this day. Now, they no longer need to risk their lives for a barely full meal, and no longer need to worry about poisonous snakes and insects hidden among the leaves of the bushes. They will even have their own house with the help of the master's other clans, which is much more comfortable than a tree hole. Dillidus, don't keep staring at the master. That's very offensive. If you are caught, you will be punished by the master. A tabby cat with grey hair walked past Dillidus carrying a wooden board and warned sternly. It was a 50-year-old tabby cat man, which was considered long-lived among wild tabby cat men. Most tabby cat men died in their youth, while hunting or being hunted. Dillidus nodded obediently. I know, meow, Uncle Kakashimi. Uncle Kakashima's tone just now was as strict as when he taught them before. Avoid big beasts or beasts with fangs, shake the branches before climbing the tree, and don't eat blue and purple berries. It turned out that Uncle Kakashimi was right. Babimi didn't shake the branches before climbing the tree and was bitten to death by a poisonous snake hidden in the leaves. But Dillidus felt in her heart that Uncle Kakashimi was wrong this time. It had never been a member of the true Dragon Lord's family, so how could it know these things? The true Dragon Lord was so good to them, and he would definitely not punish them for staring at him. Dillidus's thin body struggled to carry the wooden board forward, but her heart was more cheerful than ever before, and she couldn't help humming a song with constant meowing. The huge blue dragon flew toward the ground, twisting and shrinking before its huge body rolled over the treetops, turning into a scaly man with blue scales on his face. What's going on in Blackston Town? Why can't I buy any food? Corelia shook her head solemnly. I don't know. I went to Baron Bray's manor, but I couldn't get in. In addition, I felt a dangerous and evil atmosphere in the town. Long N had originally asked Corelia to come to Blackston Town to buy more food for emergency because of the sudden surge in the population of his clan, but he didn't expect that he didn't even see the greedy Baron Bray. He could buy food in another place, but the evil atmosphere that Corelia felt was dangerous in Blackston Town made Long N curious. Corelia, a silver dragon, was just and kind, and she probably wouldn't sit idly by and watch this evil atmosphere. Long N decided to go to Blackston Town to take a look. As soon as he entered Blackston Town, Long N frowned. Although the prosperity of Blackrock Town was distorted and built on the erotic and violent industries, at least the whole town was full of vitality and had a wild vitality. But now, looking at the empty streets, there are less than 10 people to be seen. The few pedestrians were either wandering around numbly or in a hurry. Bang! Long N kicked open the wooden door of the Braysword Tavern. In the usually crowded and noisy tavern, there were only two gloomy-faced drinkers and a drunkard under the table. Long N walked to the bar and slapped 2 gold coins. 2 drinks, one is for you, and another glass of malt juice for this lady. The bartender, Old Haddo, who was wiping the wine glass absent-mindedly, came to his senses and saw Long N's appearance clearly. "Oh, thank you very much. Is it you?" Long N nodded, took the wine glass handed over by Old Haddo, and took a sip, and said, "What happened here? Where did all the people on the street go?" Old Haddo poured himself a glass of rye and sneered, "War, taxes, and hard labor have ruined this town, sir." "War, taxes, and hard labor? But what does this have to do with adventurers and mercenaries?" Corellia frowned and asked in confusion. "The extraordinary people in this world have the status of free people by default. Only those merchants, civilians, and serfs are the subjects of the nobles. Logically speaking, war and hard labor have nothing to do with the extraordinary people with free identities. At most, only taxes will have some impact on them. And how could a small town like Blackrock Town, which is full of adventurers and mercenaries, decline because of war, taxes, and hard labor?" Long N shook his head, and Old Haddo sighed helplessly. "Beautiful lady, adventurers and mercenaries are also human beings. They need to eat, sleep, and excrete. Oh, sorry, please forgive my rude words, but this is the fact. Serfs are taken away to do hard labor, and merchants and civilians are bankrupted due to taxes. If they want to continue to live, they can only escape secretly. Without these people to provide services, adventurers and mercenaries can only leave. Anyway, there are more towns near the Storm Mountains than Blackstone Town in Boron. If the people flee without the permission of the Lord, they will become refugees without identity documents, and face the fate of being captured by slave traders. The best outcome is to go to a stable noble territory and be a serf without human rights for the noble master for a lifetime. Taking such a risk just to leave is enough to prove that staying here makes them feel more terrible." Long N frowned as he listened to Old Haddo's words, and suddenly asked, "Where are those prostitutes?" "Prostitutes belong to the Lord's subjects, but they cannot serve as forced labor, and their families are unlikely to be merchants who went bankrupt due to taxes. Even if they serve as military prostitutes, they would not need so many. After all, the food transported by the army is very expensive." Old Haddo was silent for a moment, and said, "I spent some money to find a safe place for some of them, but most of them disappeared, probably leaving Blackrock Town." Long N narrowed his eyes. From the investigation of Corellia and Videlpin, the expeditionary force of the Western Province did not bring so many forced laborers, and Blackrock Town, which only contributed a few hundred soldiers, was even less likely to capture all the serfs for forced labor. Serfs plus those prostitutes. There were too many people who disappeared suddenly. Coupled with the evil aura and danger that Corellia vaguely sensed, Long N's eyes immediately became sharp. "Let's go and visit Baron Bray." Ron walked out of the tavern, and in front of everyone's shocked gazes, he transformed into a huge blue real dragon. He flapped his wings, creating a strong wind, and flew into the sky. Chapter 52, The Devil from Hell. Long N folded his wings, and landed in the unattended and overgrown manor. In Long N's perception, there was not a single living person in the manor. The guards guarding the manor gate, to confuse others, had fled in fear before Long N landed. Suddenly, Long N felt an evil breath flashing in the manor castle. Long N narrowed his eyes, and said in a low voice in the direction of the castle, "Come out, don't make me say it again." A few seconds passed, and there was still no movement in the direction of the castle, as if it was just Long N's illusion. But Long N did not move his gaze away, but brewed thunder and lightning in his mouth. "Haha, great true dragon, your perception is really sharp. I just couldn't help but secretly take a look at your majestic figure, and you noticed it." A tall, pure and beautiful girl emerged from the shadows in the castle, took a few steps forward, leaned on the windowsill and chuckled. The lightning in Long N's mouth gradually disappeared, and he examined the figure leaning on the windowsill. She has a human appearance, a beautiful face with an intoxicating smile, and a tight and simple made dress that outlines a perfect figure, just like a harmless and charming girl. Whether from the perspective of a human in her previous life or a real dragon at this time, this girl can make people's heart beat. but Long N's eyes saw through her disguise, and a pair of black wings vaguely emerged in the shadow behind her. Coupled with the faint aura of depravity on her body, Long N has guessed her identity. This is a succubus, an angel who fell into the hell of Beta, or a low-level devil who was contaminated with the spark of divinity and transformed into a mid-level devil. HMPH, devil? You don't stay in Beta hell, but come to the main material world to improve your performance? Or is your master short of money again? Although the word improved performance was made up by Long N Sheng, it did not prevent the succubus from understanding its meaning. She chuckled like a silver bell and said, "What an interesting word. You are really a humorous real dragon." Then she put on a distressed and angry look. "Alas, I don't want to come to the main material world either. It would be bad if I was targeted by those annoying light priests and paladins, but the masters above gave an order, so I can only come out to make quick money. We are always short of ding dang. For these devils from Beta hell, the souls of intelligent creatures are currency, which they also call ding dang. In order to have more ding dang, the greedy and cunning devils always try to create evil events in the main material world and lure intelligent creatures to fall, so as to obtain more fallen souls. Humans, as intelligent creatures with a short life cycle and extremely fast reproduction rate, are the most suitable crops for the devils. They are like leeks in the vegetable garden. After harvesting one crop, a new crop will grow immediately. Therefore, most of the evil events caused by the devil occur in the human kingdom, just like the current Baron of Bray. Long N smiled and said, "It's really pitiful, beautiful lady, but I'm afraid you have a good harvest this time. Maybe it's enough for you to be promoted." The succubus cursed the greedy real dragon in her heart, but her harvest was really good this time. In addition to the ding dang that had to be handed over, she could also conceal the number and keep a small part of the ding dang privately as a reasonable loss in completing the work. The property of the Baron of Bray can also make her wallet a little richer. The devils use souls as currency, but gold and gems are also loved by them. In the hell of Bato, the exchange rate between gold coins and ding dang is usually maintained at 6 to 8 gold coins per ding dang. After all, whether it is to maintain the survival and development of the evil sect in the main material world, or to respond to the wishes made by some fallen people who sell their souls to the devil, such as give me a lot of gold coins, these valuable gadgets in the main material world are needed. The succubus pulled down his collar, put his hand between the two white and tender balls, took out a shining gem, and played with it in his hand. "Great Lord True Dragon, since you said so, of course everyone who sees it will get a share, but you should not be interested in ding dang, right?" The succubus showed a pitiful look, "But you also know that no matter how good our harvest is, we are only working for those adults above. The real harvest is less than 20,000 gold coins, which have been exchanged for lovely gems by me. I want 60%. Long N said lightly. The succubus's face did not change, and she smiled and said, "Of course, no problem, Great Lord True Dragon." As soon as the succubus finished speaking, a thunderbolt as thick as a bucket suddenly bombarded her body, and the succubus, who had no time to react, was pierced through the whole body by a strong electric current. Long N's body was filled with a strong fishy smell, which was the smell of ozone produced by the intense static electricity accumulated to a certain extent. With electric light flashing all over his body, Long N accelerated suddenly and crashed into the low castle. As the bricks and stones collapsed, his sharp claws pierced through the smooth belly of the succubus, whose clothes were torn by the electricity, and skewered the succubus on his claws, and flew into the sky. The succubus only had vicious resentment towards this blue dragon who attacked him at a disagreement, but her mind was still clear and she wanted to take out the long rope wrapped around her delicate waist. The succubus was better at fighting at a distance, so she had to find a way to control this damn real dragon first. Long N would certainly not give her this opportunity. The static electricity accumulated in the blood, muscles, and scales instantly boiled, and the succubus screamed. Seeing that the succubus still reached for the long rope around his waist after screaming, Long N increased the intensity of the current, making the succubus scream louder and longer. Long N looked at the wilting demon and said coldly, "I don't like to say the same thing twice." With the demon, whose clothes were electrocuted and shattered into charcoal on his front paw, Long N headed straight for Blackstone Town. If he guessed correctly, this incident should not be caused by just this demon. The evil aura was concentrated in Blackstone Town, but he met this demon in the abandoned Bray Manor, so she probably had an accomplice who was organizing the evil incident. Therefore, Long N took action directly and made this powerful demon lose its combat ability by a sneak attack. This demon did not bargain for his proposal to take 60% of the gems, which was not in line with the greedy nature of the devil. Most of them wanted to wait for their accomplices to finish their work and then work together to escape from Long N, and never thought of really sharing a share with Long N. If it were those more insidious and cunning high-ranking demons, they would only bargain while waiting for help when facing Long N's request and would not let Long N see any flaws. As a devil, this last demon was still a little too immature. Just as Long N flew to the edge of Blackrock Town, an evil, corrupted aura suddenly erupted in the center of the town. Pain, betrayal, lies, and the illusion of hell of indulgence were vaguely visible in that corrupt aura. Long N's wings flashed with lightning, and he accelerated towards the center of the aura. Chapter 53 Ceremony. The greasy, white, and fat Baron Bray sat on a high-backed chair at the top of the den hall, looking down at the untouchables below with a gloomy and twisted look. A middle-aged man who looked polite stood beside Baron Bray with one hand on his waist and the other hand in front. He squinted and smiled. "Dear Baron, this is the last batch. After completing the ceremony, you will gain the power of your great-grandfather and become a powerful high-ranking knight. You will also lead the glorious Bray family back to the Earl's throne. Your father will be pleased with you." "Really? Father?" Baron Bray's chaotic and twisted mind flashed through his father's admonitions to him, asking him to practice hard and work hard to revive the glory of the family. Then he recalled the scolding and even whipping from his father. His father, who was obviously only a second-level knight, asked him to become a high-ranking knight and would beat and scold him at will if he didn't agree with his wishes. This memory of hatred made Baron Bray's face even more distorted. Such days continued until his father died. Baron Bray, who was not talented enough, did not break through to the middle-level knight until his father closed his eyes with regret and was buried in the loess amid the prayers of the priest. Baron Bray, who had no further progress in strength, decided to put his hope on his descendants, just as his father did to him. But the gods seemed to have played a big joke on Baron Bray. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how many wives and lovers he had, he could not give birth to an heir, which made Baron Bray fall into despair. He began to indulge himself in pleasure and self-indulgence. After almost exhausting the family's savings, he began to impose heavy taxes. The Lord's right to life and death gradually made him lost, but he always had an obsession with becoming a high-level knight in his heart. He wanted to prove it to his pathetic father and make him regret what he had done to him. Baron Bray had always longed for an apology from his father, until a blood-red creature with a small horn on its forehead, a strange and terrifying smile, and a skinny body came to him. It was a little devil full of flattery and lies. It used words to stir up the deepest desires in Baron Bray's heart, promising him the power of a high-ranking knight, and tempting him to sign his name on a human skin contract with densely written clauses. Since then, Baron Bray has begun to follow their advice, levying increasingly heavy taxes, and turning more of his subjects into his serfs. Every gold coin he earned was given to them to redeem himself for the materials needed for the promotion ceremony. Today, he felt the surging power in his body, raised his mouth with some pride, but gritted his teeth with infinite hatred. "Did you see it, my dear father? Only one step away, I can break through the limit of the intermediate level and be promoted to a high-ranking knight of the 7th level." He picked up his father's skull with a twisted smile, wanting him to witness his great achievement. His twisted smile suddenly turned cold, and he looked down at the group of untouchables expressionlessly and said, "Kill everyone around you, only one of you can survive." In the den hall, the desperate and terrified people standing among the blood, limbs, and internal organs on the ground were at a loss. The strange blood mist filled the air, stirring their fragile nerves and desire to survive. Finally, a strong coachman picked up the blood-stained longsword on the ground and slashed at the prostitute who collapsed and lost control of her bladder. The blade slashed into her neck, but it didn't have enough power to move forward and got stuck in her cervical vertebrae. The roar of venting and the scream of fear destroyed the last bit of rationality in everyone's heart. They all snatched the weapons that were inserted into the corpses or dropped on the ground, shouting and waving them around. Those who didn't grab the weapons exerted the primitive instinct of wild beasts, throwing others to the ground, pinching their necks, and biting their faces. The cries, begging, praying, cursing, screaming, and roaring seemed to be woven into a beautiful movement, which made the man standing next to Baron Bray clap his hands, enjoying it with a smile, and immersing himself in it, squinting his eyes. Amidst the chaotic noise, Baron Bray's breathing became heavier. He could feel the endless power pouring into his body, expanding inside him, and flowing between his blood vessels and muscles. Ha ha. I'm going to succeed. I'm going to succeed. He raised his father's skull and showed off by letting the empty eye sockets of the skull stare at everything in front of him. Baron Bray's roar gradually turned into a rant, and his evil aura soared into the sky. His flesh and blood gradually melted, turning into nutrients for the worm eggs hidden in his body, allowing the worm eggs to hatch into one wriggling maggot after another, greedily absorbing his flesh and blood under his fat skin. But his body did not shrink, but was swollen by the rapidly growing maggots until his skin became transparent, and the wriggling of the maggots under his skin was clearly visible. When the maggots grew to a certain size, they immediately began to fight and devour each other, and Baron Bray's aura became stronger and stronger as the number of maggots decreased, until it broke through the boundary of the intermediate level, and was promoted to a high-ranking knight of the 7th level. In other words, it transformed into a strange-looking 7th level monster. Under Baron Bray's skin was a deformed humanoid worm, and Baron Bray seemed to be wearing on his body by the worm. But he was unaware of it, because his consciousness fell into chaos and collapsed. He kept asking the skull repeatedly, "Did you see? Did you see?" Seeing the killing filled with evil desires in the hall coming to an end, the worm under Baron Bray's skin gradually became clear, and a pair of sharp horns curved upwards grew on its forehead. The middle-aged man standing by bowed and saluted, his grace impeccable, and said respectfully, "This body is ready to welcome you, sir. I hope you are satisfied with it." Baron Bray heard his hoarse and twisted evil voice, and vaguely felt that something was wrong, but his blurred mind could no longer think of anything. Boom. Suddenly, a huge blue figure more than 10 meters long smashed the dome of the hall, and the whole building was torn in half. The bronze bell on the high pavilion fell with the bricks and stones, and the last bell sounded. The collapse of the building stirred up thick smoke and dust, and the sunlight shone into it, like the first light in the holy book of light that illuminated the darkness. The huge blue dragon shook off the dust and gravel on its body, and violent lightning exploded between its scales with bursts of dazzling flashes. Long looked calmly at Baron Bray, who was holding a giant worm in a leather bag, and asked in a cold tone, "Perhaps I should say sorry? It seems that I came at the wrong time." Chapter 54 The incarnation of a high-ranking devil. Bloody corpses, broken limbs and arms filled the entire hall, leaving no warmth in the sunlight. Long ends swept across those blood-stained, twisted, painful and fearful faces, and his eyes stayed on the face of a figure huddled in the corner for a moment. It was a girl wearing a loose and old maid outfit, with 2 braids and healthy freckles on her face. Long N remembered that she was a maid at Bray Manor and had led them there. But now, there was no timid smile on her face, only confusion and helplessness. She held a dagger tightly in her hand and sat against the wall, with a long sword stuck in her chest, and the blood gushing out dyed the clothes on her chest red. The man standing beside Baron Bray watched the arc on Long N's body become more violent, and smelled a hint of fish in the air that became stronger, and stepped forward to stand in front of Baron Bray. Its skin turned into a strange blue-green color, and a pair of curved horns grew on its forehead. It bowed to Long N cautiously but respectfully and said, "Haha, great true dragon, please forgive our neglect. If there is anything that makes you dissatisfied, we are willing to compensate you." Long N said nothing, and raised his claws on the ground. A naked woman with drooping black wings was held in his claws. Long N's claws squeezed hard, and the head of the succubus exploded instantly. He used this method to clearly express his attitude. "No need for compensation. I have nothing to say to you maggots from hell." With lightning all over his body, Long N's short distance burst speed reached its limit, and he rushed towards the harvester in front of him like a huge blue lightning. The harvester did not have any emotional fluctuations for the companions that Long N had crushed to death, as if the one who died was just an ant. It has always maintained a full attention and was always on guard against the attack of this true dragon. But the explosive power of this real dragon was beyond its imagination. The wrong calculation made it unable to display its own ability in time. In the face of life and death, it decisively gave up barren prey and wanted to dodge to the side. However, a maggot-like tentacle instantly wrapped around its neck, imprisoning it in place. The huge dragon claw enlarged in its right-end pupils and smashed its head with one claw. The headless torso slipped from the entanglement of the tentacles, revealing barren prey behind it, who had been stretched so much by maggots that his original appearance could not be seen. What an amazing speed and strength, the maggot wearing barren prey said. It slowly stood up from the high back chair, and countless worm tentacles stretched out from its back, supporting its body. Let me introduce myself. My name is Kugma. The maggot's mouth, which was covered with fine fangs, opened and closed as it said, as a young dragon, you are one of the best true dragons I have ever seen. The worm-like tentacles drilled into the body of the Reaper, causing it to shrink rapidly, while the maggot named Kugma grew faster. But, the maggot's face, whose head had not yet been fully formed, showed a disdainful smile. Believe me, you don't want to be an enemy of a powerful hellfire. If you become a mature blue dragon, perhaps I will still retreat in front of you, but now you are just a young dragon less than 15 meters long. You have killed 2 of my capable subordinates, but out of respect for the real dragon, I allow you to apologize to me with gold coins and treasures. Long N looked at the fat maggot talking coldly and asked, are you done with your nonsense? The disdain and complacency on the face of the humanoid maggot Kugma paused and instantly turned into a sneer. Do you think you can see through my thoughts and think you are very smart? Foolish real dragon, I advise you to give up those stupid ideas of being my enemy, otherwise wait to face the revenge from Bay to hell. Long N stopped talking nonsense and expressed his position directly with actions. He squeezed the dragon's breath crop in his chest, and the high pressure squeezed out most of the dragon's breath stored in the crop. The sticky bright blue plasma turned into a dense lightning net in the air, and gathered into a thick electric light heading towards Kugma. As for its threat, Long N was dismissive of it. If it was a real hellish demon here, Long N would turn around and leave without saying a word, but what was here was just an incarnation that had not yet fully formed. If this devil named Kugma really had the power to overwhelm Long N, it would definitely act without hesitation, instead of inducing or threatening him with nonsense, which was just a means of delaying time. As for the revenge it mentioned, Long N snorted in his heart, that would have to wait until it could descend into the main material world. The devils in Bay to Hell were rejected by the main material world. The more powerful the devils were, the greater the rejection they suffered. They could only rely on creating incarnations and other methods to bypass the restrictions of the main material world. The power of the incarnation was far weaker than that of the original body, and Long N was not afraid of the revenge of several incarnations. The squirming fat tentacles wrapped Kugma into a thick ball. The arcs of electricity from the breath hit the tough skin of the tentacles, and there was a tendency to be deflected and eliminated, but the energy of the thunder breath that gathered into a bright blue light column was too huge. With the explosion of thunder, the lightning penetrated the skin of the tentacles of the demon incarnation. Kugma was knocked back several meters in the thunder explosion, and the tentacles and feet fixed on the ground plowed several deep grooves. Long N flapped his wings to cross the distance of more than 10 meters, and swung out with his dragon claws, but was pulled away by Kugma's tentacles and smashed the wall with one head. The building with a completely destroyed load-bearing structure collapsed with a loud bang, and countless bricks and stones fell, but it had no effect on either Long N or Kugma. Long N's body flashed with lightning, and the tentacles wrapped around his front claws were electrocuted and twitched. He struggled hard and broke the tentacles, and greasy and sticky white liquid sprayed out from the broken surface of the tentacles. A large wave of fire and light spells that restrained evil quickly took shape and were aimed at the demon incarnation buried in the bricks and stones. After the explosion subsided, white maggot-like tentacles emerged from the ruins and fired a grey ray at Long. Long flicked his tail to block the ray, and the scales and flesh at the place it instantly disintegrated and disappeared, leaving a deep pit that could be seen through the bone. Long, who was hit by the dissociation spell, cast a bunch of low-level shield spells on himself with a serious look, and did not give Kug'ma a chance to cast spells, and directly slapped Kug'ma, who had half of his body crawled out of the ruins. The demon incarnation Kug'ma stretched out 2 arms and tentacles, and with the same huge strength, he resisted Long's claws, and even pushed Long's claws back. Long activated the arcs between his scales, paralyzing Kug'ma's arms and tentacles, and weakening its strength. He leaned forward, pressing the weight of his huge body on Kug'ma's arms, and smashed down heavily. He rolled over Kug'ma's body, and pressed it into the ground. The houses affected collapsed instantly. Suddenly, rotten arms stretched out from the ruins, and grabbed Long's scales and wings tightly. Long rolled up, and pulled those arms and torsos out of the ruins, hanging on his body and wings like wind chimes. The arcs could not make all the corpses loosen their arms. This was the innate spell of the Hellfiend, awaken the dead. The corpses that died in the hall were transformed into fearless undead creatures by it. The corpses hanging on Long's body suddenly exploded, and the evil undead breath adhered to Long's scales, making him feel that his body became rotten and stiff, and the impact of the explosion made him shake. Kug'ma's disgusting avatar body crawled out of the ruins, supported by tentacles, and with a sneer, it stretched out a finger and aimed at Ron's head. Chapter 55 End. Kug'ma's finger pointed at Long's head, accumulating grey magic aura, and it was ready to use a dissociation spell to kill the ignorant blue dragon in front of it. A bright silver real dragon suddenly fell from the sky and hit Kug'ma's round body. Kug'ma was knocked back several meters, and the dissociation spell ray deflected by his fingertips hit the wings of the bright silver real dragon, directly tearing a big hole in the silver dragon's wings. The knocked back Kug'ma climbed up from the ground with an indifferent expression, waving his tentacles to dispel the breath of the silver dragon. Being knocked back and crushed by these 2 weak real dragons one after another, Kug'ma felt a little angry. If it was the real body that descended, it would definitely refine these 2 dragon cubs into undead dragons. Unfortunately, it descended as an incarnation, and this incarnation would take a long time to truly mature, and it would also take time to adapt to the rules of the main material world. The strength it can exert in its current posture is very limited. Kug'ma was about to release dissociation again, this time aiming at the weaker silver dragon, aiming to kill it with one strike. Corellia stood up despite the pain, and before she could release the healing spell, she flapped her wings to escape Kug'ma's lock. But the last dissociation spell dissolved the main wing bone that supported her wing membrane, and her entire left wing fell to the ground powerlessly. Boom. A thunderous sound made Kug'ma's heart jump. He looked in the direction of Long, but he didn't see Long. The sky above Blackrock Town was covered with dark clouds, and it turned from day to night in an instant. A moist breath came from the wind, and faint thunder rumbled in the dark clouds. Kug'ma felt a little uneasy from this abnormal thunderstorm. In the dark leaden clouds, a nimble blue dragon was faintly visible. Long flapped his wings and hovered under the leaden clouds, letting the lightning strike his body. 3 staffs that seemed unusually small compared to him were held in a transparent dragon claw, surrounding him. This leaden cloud with thunder came from the 7th ring high-level spell Thunderstorm engraved on the lightning staff. This is a pure destructive spell with a large coverage area and long duration. Each strike of lightning has the power of lightning spells above the 5th ring. After the amplitude of the staff, the power is even close to the 6th ring, but this powerful spell requires a long preparation time. Long En thought, and the earth-based staff obtained from Glengo activated the 7th ring high-level spell Earthquake. The ground where Kug'ma stood immediately let out a low roar, rocks collapsed, land turned over, and houses collapsed. In such an environment, it could not continue to release the disintegration spell, and could only try its best to avoid the cracks in the earth that kept opening and closing. If it was a real body, it would only need to fly up or cast the teleportation spell to easily escape from this unfavorable environment, so why would it be so strenuous to deal with it? Boom. The brewing thunder roared, and several lightning bolts were deliberately guided to hit Long En's body. Long En waved the soul staff with soul crystals beside him, and cast the 7th ring high-level spell Soul Explosion. Kug'ma's heart was alarmed, but he was restricted by the earthquake spell, and could not dodge. He only felt that his will to descend exploded, and his head was in great pain. Long En watched the head of Kugma's humanoid maggot body suddenly explode, splashing a ball of sticky white slurry, and his body was uncontrollably squeezed into two twisted pieces by the dislocated rock layer. Boom. He triggered the thunder brewing in the clouds in advance, and hundreds of powerful lightning exploded at the same time. The sudden light illuminated the entire Blackstone town in an instant. The thunder like a lightning forest connected from the clouds to Long En's body, and the strong current was absorbed by Long En's blood, muscles, and scales. The scales that absorbed the lightning energy to the limit completely turned into a transparent bright blue, emitting a dazzling blue light. Under the backlash of his mental power from releasing 3 high level 7 thring spells in a row, and the tearing feeling of his body reaching its limit, Long En activated the electrical energy stored in his body. Boom. A lightning beam that condensed hundreds of lightning energies instantly hit Kugma, who was stuck in the cracks of the rock layer. Long En concentrated most of the power of the 7 thring range attack spell Thunderstorm into a single attack, which was even more powerful than ordinary A-thring spells. Kugma's tough skin was also broken by this level of attack, and sticky white liquid flowed out from the cracks that exploded in various parts of its body and turned into a charred carbon color under the fierce lightning strike. Long En lowered his flight altitude, glanced at Curelia, who was shocked by the previous attack, and saw the big hole between her wings, and looked at her inquiringly. Curelia shook her head, indicating that she was fine. Long looked at Kugma's charred and silent body, his eyes turned cold, and he aimed all the remaining dragon breath at Kugma's body. At the moment, when the dragon breath was sprayed, Kugma's charred body suddenly jumped up from the ground, narrowly avoiding the breath that turned into thunder. Kugma, who was preparing to pretend to be a dead body to survive or launch a sneak attack, did not expect Long to not even let go of its incarnation's body, and angrily shot a disintegration spell at Long. Then, turned around and ran away. Kugma moved very fast as the tentacles moved alternately. Facing an unbeatable opponent, the devils never had the tradition of fighting to the end, and they were more keen to escape whenever they could. In the devil's value concept, only their own life is the most valuable thing, and honor and face are meaningless to them. Kugma's incarnation was not easy to come by, and for its own benefit, it decided to save this incarnation first. As for revenge, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future. But Long did not dodge the attack of disintegration as he had imagined. Instead, he crossed his claws to protect his head, flapped his wings wildly, and rushed into the disintegration head-on with lightning. The grey magic aura of disintegration left a deep round pit on Long's front paws, but it could not slow Long's speed. He opened his ferocious mouth and flew towards Kugma. Kugma looked back at Long, who was determined to keep his incarnation, with his eyes full of anger. Long bit Kugma's body with a big mouth, his muscles tensed, and his fangs crossed, holding Kugma's incarnation in his mouth. Kugma's body suddenly expanded violently and exploded with a bang, tearing Long's upper and lower jaws, and blood flowed out of his mouth and nose. With the severe pain of tearing and the feeling of concussion, Long raised his claws and forcibly broke the dislocated jaw back. Curelia ran over from a distance and cast several healing spells on Long. With the powerful self-healing ability of the real dragon, Long's torn muscles in his upper and lower jaws began to heal quickly. "You're crazy. It's just an incarnation. Even if it runs away, I can still ask my father to destroy it. Why are you working so hard?" Long looked at the somewhat excited Curelia, smiled, and said in a hoarse voice, after tearing his throat and vocal cords, "Some things are fun to do by yourself. It's okay, it's all over." Long tilted his head to indicate, and Curelia looked at the big hole on her left wing at the signal, and then remembered to cast a few healing spells on herself. Long smiled and shook his head, looking back at Blackrock Town. His eyes swept across the ruins caused by the battle, and saw a familiar figure rummaging through the ruins. Long landed quietly beside Old Haddo, watching Old Haddo use his bleeding hands to pull open the bricks and pull out a corpse. "They are already dead. There is no need to dig anymore," Long said in a hoarse voice. Old Haddo was startled, turned around, and knelt on the ground in fear. "Stand up, I just invited you to drink today." Long En looked at Old Haddo, who stood up tremblingly under his order, and asked, "Why don't you run, but save others here? Aren't you afraid?" Old Haddo looked at Long En, whose appearance had changed drastically, and trembled and couldn't speak. After a long time, he pointed to the corpse he had just dug out and said, "She is a prostitute. She only wants 6 copper coins at a time, 12 copper coins a night, sir." Baron Bray's head was blown more than 20 meters away by the impact of the self-explosion and fell on a piece of grass. A broken maggot fell out of his brain, which made him feel much more conscious. He felt like he had a dream. In the dream, he had the strength of a high-ranking knight, but it was gone. When he woke up, he was going to die, but he still couldn't prove it to his father. Looking at the sky, he recalled everything between him and his father, and suddenly remembered that the last words his father said before he closed his eyes were that it didn't matter if he couldn't become a high-ranking knight, and being a good lord could also bring glory to the family. His broken throat twitched, and he exhaled a long breath. Chapter 56 Receiving the Territory. Long En looked down at the ruins in front of him, and then looked up at the weed-covered farmland outside Blackstone Town. The Lord of Blackstone Town died unexpectedly, and was tempted by the devil to commit the evil of bloody sacrifice. According to the law of human nobles, even if his family still has blood, he can no longer inherit his territory, and this barony will be taken back by the royal family. Under normal circumstances, such an ownerless territory, even a small barony, is worth the nobles in the Royal Capital Council to spend several days arguing about its ownership, not to mention that the Principality of Bolin is now in civil strife. It can be predicted that for a long time, the nobles in the royal capital who are busy suppressing the rebels will have no time to take care of this barony located in the most remote area of the West. Those nobles who are still loyal to the royal family cannot take over territories that do not belong to them at will. According to the law of nobles, except for legal redemption, land seized through glorious wars during wartime, or opening up the wilderness to build towns, all other private annexation behaviors are prohibited. In this world, in the backward aristocratic human country, a territory without a lord means no law. Long En felt that this territory urgently needed a leader to restore its production and vitality, and it happened that he had enough leisure time to help the Principality of Bolin take care of this land and the people on this land. Old Haddo, how many living people are there in this town? Long En asked. Although Old Haddo's body was shaking uncontrollably in front of the real dragon, he was not hurt and calmed down a little. He said in a trembling voice, "There are probably 400 or 500 people, Lord Dragon." Long En nodded silently and said to Old Haddo, "Tell those who don't want to escape from the territory and become serfs and slaves, and those who want to continue to live, stay here. Now this territory belongs to me." Old Haddo stared at the real dragon in front of him, not quite understanding what it meant. Long En did not explain, but turned to look at Kirelia, who was dragging her wings. "Thank you for your hard work. Come on, let's go back to the territory first." Long En looked at Kirelia and lowered one wing to the ground. Kirelia nodded, changed into a human form, and climbed up Long's back along his wings. Long flapped his wings and said, "Hold on tight." Feeling Kirelia's legs under her skirt clamping the scales on his neck, Long flapped his dragon wings and flew into the sky. After taking Kirelia back to her dragon nest to rest, Long ordered half of the Minotaurs and 300 Dragonvein kobolds to follow him to Blackrock Town. Old Haddo, who stayed in Blackrock Town with trepidation, and a group of civilians who gathered together suddenly looked up at the sky. A blue dragon of more than 10 meters fell from the sky. Some people were so panicked that they forgot to run for their lives, and some were afraid that, if they turned around and ran away, they would be targeted by the dragon. Under the fearful gaze of the civilians, the blue dragon spoke in human language. "I, Long En, a friend of the royal family of Boran, the patron of the supreme dragon Platinum Dragon God, and the Lord of Storm Mountain, announce that I will take over Blackrock Town and its territory. Your former lord, Baron Bray, has exploited the civilians and colluded with the devil, and I have given him a fair judgment." Long En's majestic, but not evil attitude in the series of titles he said, made the fear in the eyes of the civilians slightly reduced, bringing a hint of respect. Long En continued, "From now on, I will give you enough food. In exchange, you need to work for me and restore the production of Blackrock Town as soon as possible. In addition, excluding food, your daily salary is 8 copper coins." Long En's attitude of threatening with words instead of using force made these civilians relax, but they still couldn't help but feel afraid in the face of such a behemoth. and the content of Long N's words made them dumbfounded. Working for this dragon, not only can you get food, but also copper coins? It's a lie, right? You know, even the lords who are also human beings recruited civilians to work. Most of the time they did not pay, and some even required the recruited civilians to bring their own food. In their minds, working for the lord is the obligation of the civilians who are protected by the lord's rule. But whether they believe it or not, they stayed where they are. Long N saw these changes in human emotions. The civilians in this world rely on the lords for survival. They live on the lord's land, obey the lord's laws and orders, and pay taxes to the lords. From the day they were born, they saw and learned how to survive under the rule of the lords, which made them extremely obedient. Therefore, even if Baron Bray raised taxes and intensified the exploitation of the people, they still endured it all and were forced to sell themselves to the lords as serfs or sell their bodies to earn a meager income, and they never thought of escaping from here. Without the lord, they were like headless flies, not knowing whether they should stay here or leave like others and become refugees without identity. It was for this reason that they stood here together despite the lie of old Hadar that a lord will soon take over Blackrock Town, and they should gather in this open space to welcome the new lord. After Long said that he would become their lord and showed order and reliability, these civilians were still afraid, but finally no longer confused, but settled down, as if they had found their backbone. The rumbling sound of marching and the collision of armor came, and the civilians who looked up and looked around were horrified to find that a large number of terrible monsters in armor surrounded them, especially the huge minotaurs, which made them feel terrified from the bottom of their hearts. Long said, "They are my subjects like you. According to my laws, subjects shall not harm each other." Then the terrified civilians saw that those monsters that were ferocious and bloodthirsty in the mouths of mercenaries and adventurers not only did not pounce on them as food, but instead pushed carts loaded with food. Grengo, who came with the grain delivery team, stood up and said loudly, "According to the order of the Great Lord, we will start distributing grain now. Each person can get 1 kilogram of yams and half a kilogram of wheat." Part of the grain that Long N had purchased before was used for sowing during this farming season, and the rest was barely enough for the newly added clansmen in the territory. But it was not a big deal to feed a few hundred more humans, and they could just buy more from other human lords. Compared with the kobolds and minotaurs, Grengo's appearance was also ugly, but its deformed and short body among the hill giants made these humans feel much more at ease. At least it looked like a normal humanoid. As it shouted, a hungry civilian walked towards Grengo bravely, and the vicious looking kobold next to him stuffed yams and a small bag of wheat into his bewildered hands. He stood there in a daze, looking at Long N for a while, and then at the kobold who stuffed the food into his hands. Glengo's old, ugly face forced out a kind smile. "After receiving the food, stand aside and don't block other people." The man who received the food came to his senses, bowed and saluted, thanked him repeatedly, and stepped aside, while holding the food in his arms tightly. Seeing that someone really got the food, the civilians finally felt relieved and rushed to Glengo. Chapter 57, Letter from the Capital. "Everyone, obey the order." Long N's majestic voice sounded at the side, and the chaotic crowd quickly calmed down. They had begun to believe in the new lord, and followed Long N's orders with fear and respect, and consciously lined up in a long line. Until the last person in the team received the food, they were still a little uneasy, but the hope of survival was shining in their eyes and they waited quietly for the lord's next order. Long N, who squatted aside and watched all the civilians receive food, said, "Starting tomorrow, everyone will gather in this open space after hearing the order, and someone will arrange your work." The next day, after a full meal, the civilians behaved more obediently. After the kobolds rang the bronze bell on the street, they all came to the open space to receive food. Under the arrangement of Glengo and Old Haddo, everyone began to get busy. Old Haddo was summoned by Long N and asked to assist Glengo in managing the humans in Blackrock Town. The civilians cleaned up the area around the ruins, and the bodies buried under the ruins were also dug out by them with the help of Glengo's spell. In order to prevent the spread of evil spirits and diseases, these bodies were piled up in a large pit outside the town and burned and buried. After working until noon and evening, the civilians were gathered on time to distribute the prepared food. After finishing work in the evening, they received the 8 copper coins promised by Long N. This price was not high, but it made these civilians completely believe Long N's words, and recognized this lord who was too different from them, and was not of the same race from the bottom of their hearts. Long N looked at the civilians who timidly took the copper coins handed over by the dog-headed man and smiled. He sincerely felt that it was really easy to make the civilians in this world obedient and work. All they needed to do was to provide food and a little insignificant salary. In the days that followed, the civilians who rekindled their hope and established trust worked harder. After cleaning up the ruins, under Long N's order, they began to plant some vegetables that matured quickly and formed a team to search for refugees who fled Blackstone Town and the territory. Most of the refugees did not escape too far, and within a few days, the population of Blackstone Town recovered to more than 1,000 people. When food began to run out, Old Haddo led several civilians to a nearby Viscount's territory to buy a large amount of food. Interestingly, the nearby barons and viscounts all knew clearly that a blue dragon had occupied the territory that originally belonged to Baron Bray, and not only did it not plunder and massacre Blackrock Town, but it led the civilians who were exploited and harmed by the previous lord to start building the territory. Long N did not order that merchants or free people were not allowed to enter and leave his territory, so the rumors of the favored one of the Platinum Dragon God and the powerful and kind Blue Dragon Lord were quickly spread, and they matched the rumors of the giant Blue Dragon appearing in the Storm Mountains and the Blue Real Dragon flying to the Storm Mountains witnessed by many people. The nobles around Blackrock Town all pretended that nothing had happened, neither paying too much attention nor deliberately avoiding it. Dare to claim to be the favored one of the Platinum Dragon God, then the Blue Dragon must not do anything cruel and tyrannical. Moreover, even if it is really a vicious real dragon, these small nobles do not have the courage and strength to punish it. This allowed Old Haddo from Blackrock Town to easily complete the transaction with the Viscount's steward without any obstruction. As the winter month was drawing to a close, the humans in Blackrock Town had gradually gotten used to seeing those weird-looking dog-headed people and those huge minotaurs as tall as a house on the streets, as well as some creatures of other races that were said to be the subjects of the Lord. Some brave humans could even say hello to a few familiar dog-headed people and minotaurs on their way to work, and have a simple chat. It was just that the common language of these dog-headed people and minotaurs was not well spoken, making it difficult for them to communicate. Suddenly, the civilians who were weeding in the fields looked up and saw a griffin hovering over the town. A human knight in silver white armor rode on the griffin. He was nervous and tangled as he controlled the griffin, hesitating whether to land in this seemingly very dangerous town. Until he saw an ugly and old humanoid high-level spellcaster perform a flying spell and came to the air. During his days in Blackrock Town, Glengo had made up a lot of knowledge about the human kingdom. At this moment, he looked at the knight riding a griffin, and seeing the sash with the emblem of the royal family of Boar and Raped on the griffin, he forced a smile and asked, "May I ask what your purpose is?" The hesitant knight took out an exquisite letter and said, "Grand Duke Boran pays his respects to the powerful true dragon Longian, the patron of the Platinum Dragon God, the Lord of Storms, and this is a letter written by His Majesty the Grand Duke to Lord True Dragon. I will graduate in June, and I have been busy taking the driver's license test, doing graduation projects, and making up credits. I really can't finish typing 4,000 words today. The 2 chapters together will probably be about 3,700 or 3,800, so I'll post them before noon. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 58 Invitation. Haha, quite interesting. Long N held the exquisite letter in his hand, and a flash of lightning flashed, turning the letter into carbon powder. In the letter, the newly crowned Grand Duke of Boran expressed his gratitude to Long N for helping his principality get rid of a noble who was seduced and corrupted by the devil, praised Long N's kindness and justice, and acknowledged Long N's occupation of Blackstone Town. It was just a small barony. As long as he could win the favor of the real dragon, the Grand Duke of Boran would not blink an eye if he gave him a few more baronies. The Grand Duke of Boron did have the idea of giving more, but it was a pity that he could not transfer the territories of the feudal nobles at will. For the stability and unity of the western province, he could not please Long En in such a way that offended the nobles of the western border. The situation in Blackstone town was special. The previous lord was seduced by the devil. Strictly speaking, Long En was fighting against evil and maintaining justice. Taking over the territory was also a kind act to save the civilians. The Bray family had no other collateral bloodline, so no one would jump out to object to giving this territory to Long En. Besides, what else could they do if they didn't recognize Long's occupation? Would they have to send tens of thousands of troops and spend a lot of effort to take this small barony back from the hands of the real dragon? Grand Duke Boron directly and neatly recognized Long's occupation and then used this as an excuse to propose the idea of hiring Long to join the war and end the chaotic civil war as soon as possible. In his letter, he focused on describing the people who suffered from civil unrest and war, and his feelings were sincere and unbearable. If it were a young and energetic golden dragon, he might really be persuaded to fight for justice and save mortals from fire and water. But the person he wrote the letter to was Long. Long also felt that the humans who suffered from the war were innocent and pitiful, but it was impossible for him to rush into the battlefield where tens of thousands of people were fighting. Anyway, it was not his fault that those civilians lived a miserable life. If he saved them, Long would feel comfortable to enjoy the worship, and if he didn't save them, Long would still have a clear conscience. Long En said to the dog-headed man who delivered the letter, "Tell Glengo that I have important matters to deal with during this period. Please wish that the Principality of Boron will soon put an end to the civil unrest." Since the Grand Duke of Boron showed his kindness to him, he didn't mind sending his sincere blessings. As for fighting and killing, forget it. He didn't have time. Long En's excuse was not entirely an excuse. He did have something to do during this period. After abducting someone's daughter to work as a child laborer and causing her to be disabled at the 3rd level, the unscrupulous and black-hearted boss Long En was finally caught and was directly visited by the child laborer's parents. As early as half a month ago, a cloud giant came to Long En's territory and brought a message from Kirelia's father, the Pure Silver Eye. He asked Kirelia to return to his dragon nest and invited Long En to visit. Kirelia invited Long En to visit not long after her wings were broken. Long En said, "Haha, there is no need." But Long En couldn't refuse the formal invitation of an adult silver dragon. He used the excuse of being busy with territory affairs to delay for half a month, and finally the day of departure came. Kirelia was seriously injured in the main bone supporting the dragon's wings. Even a real dragon would need a very long time to recover from such a serious bone injury. In the past half month, Kirelia's wounds had not improved except for the healing of muscles, which made Long En feel a little flustered when he thought about meeting her father. But Long En had no choice but to go, and only by going to Kirelia's father could her injuries recover quickly. Long En flew to Kirelia's dragon nest, lowered his dragon wings, and motioned Kirelia to ride on him. Kirelia in human form had a blush on her face, but she was waiting for the dragon-shaped Vidalpin to land and get on her dragon's back. Long En was depressed and didn't understand why he was shy. He also thought that maybe Kirelia's dragon father would see him carrying his daughter and think that he had a good attitude and would not bother him. The cloud giant who brought the message had returned. Lon and Vidalpin, under the command of Kirelia, flew towards the northeast of the Aonian continent. But in the end, Kirelia and Vidalpin still climbed onto Lon's back. The flying posture of the golden dragon was elegant and fast, but Vidalpin was only a teenage dragon after all. Compared with Lon's ridiculously fast speed, which even exceeded the flying speed of an adult real dragon, it was more than a little bit behind. In order to save time for the round trip, Lon strongly requested that both women ride on him. Well, it was simply to save time, and it was definitely not because of fear of being troubled by the Pure Silver Eye, nor was it to stick to 2 pairs of thighs. The blue figure with a wingspan of 15 meters flew over the human countries of the Aonian continent, passing over vast grasslands, vast forests, and prosperous towns. Looking down from a high altitude, the changes in the environment on the ground were particularly obvious. Lon clearly felt that the climate became colder the further north he went. In the northern part of Onion, where the 4 seasons were distinct, a thick layer of snow had already covered it, making people clearly feel that it was already the cold month, the coldest time of the year. Here, crops cannot be harvested 3 times a year like in the southern part of the continent, but winter wheat has been planted long ago and is growing slowly under the snow. When the spring comes next year, the wheat planted this autumn can be harvested. Long N flew over a large area of farmland. Just from the scale of these farmlands, one can see the amazing wealth of the human kingdom in the north of Onia. According to Curelia on his back, this endless farmland belonging to the Roman Empire is about a quarter of the size of the Principality of Baalan, which made Long N secretly stunned. Even for a country that has completed industrialization in the previous life, it is very difficult to create such a large piece of arable land. This is not only a technical difficulty, but also related to the authority of the administrator, the management of farmers and farmland, and other issues. But the Roman Empire did it, and opened up, and created this piece of farmland known as the Granary of Onia. Under Curelia's command, Long N deviated from the direction, bypassed the border of the Roman Empire, and headed further east. On the 4th day of the flight, Long N and his companions saw the eastern coastline of Onia. Unlike the harsh environment of the western coast of Onia, the eastern coast often stretches out into long stretches of sandy beaches, and there are large and medium-sized ships near the coast that transport goods or catch seafood. Long N and his companions continued to fly eastward, crossing the ocean from high in the sky and passing over uninhabited islands. After another day and a half, Curelia on Long N's back suddenly said, "We are here." Long N made an emergency stop, and the 2 women rushed forward due to inertia, with their chests tightly pressed against Long N's cold and hard scales. Long N was unaware, and looked at the islands on the sea and the clouds higher in the sky in confusion. But there were no signs of man-made palaces on either the islands or the clouds. Long N muttered secretly, as an adult silver dragon, "It is impossible for the famous pure silver eye to just dig a hole on the seabed and live in it, right? This is not the style of a silver dragon." Curelia took out a silver scale that was refined to the size of a human palm from her storage ring and triggered the spiritual imprint inside it. The space above the sea surface immediately twisted and tore apart, and a snowy plain appeared in the huge crack. "Secondary elemental space?" Vidalpin asked in surprise. Long N was also slightly surprised, and could only sigh that the pure silver eye was indeed a prestigious adult silver dragon, and even the place where he lived was so awesome. Chapter 59 Meeting the Parents. The crack in the secondary element space gradually expanded to a size large enough for Long N to enter. Long N and Vidalpin slowly released their own dragon power into the crack. The dragon power of each true dragon is different from birth, similar to human fingerprints. Even if the degree of similarity is very high, there will be subtle differences. Some true dragons who are familiar with each other can also identify each other through the dragon power they sense. When a true dragon visits the dragon nest of another true dragon, it is basic courtesy to release one's dragon power in advance. It not only tells the owner of the dragon nest that there is a guest, but also expresses that one has no ill intentions. Long N and Vidalpin's release of dragon power into the secondary element space is roughly equivalent to visiting a friend's house for the first time, and then politely knocking on the door and saying hello uncle and aunt. After their dragon power was released, a gentle and friendly dragon power also came from the secondary element space, and Long N flew into the open crack. After crossing the crack, the temperature instantly dropped by 10 degrees compared to the warm sea surface. Snowflakes fell on Long N's scales and quickly turned into water droplets. Silver dragons belong to the cold type true dragons. They usually like to live in the mountains with lower temperatures in the temperate and cold zones, or in the clouds in the sky. This quiet environment with light snow is one of their favorites. Blue dragons do not have high requirements for the living environment. As long as there is a howling wind, it doesn't matter if the temperature is a little higher or a little lower. The low temperature in the wind and snow only makes Long N feel a little uncomfortable. This little temperature difference will not cause any impact on the true dragon. Long N turned his head and looked behind him. The healed space cracks completely disappeared in the air, as if they had never existed, and no trace could be found. It's really a perfect safe house for survival and development. If I didn't say it, Who would know that there is a channel connecting to the secondary element space hidden above the empty sea outside? Long N thought enviously. If he was born in such a hidden and safe secondary element space, he felt that he could survive for more than 100 years and then run out to play when he became an adult. Long N followed the direction of Kirelia's finger and flew to an ice crystal palace more than 30 meters high. This palace has layers of spires that are arranged in an orderly manner. Every wall and every pillar is carved with beautiful and exquisite reliefs and hollow structures. It is a palace that can make silver dragons who like exquisite works of art admire it, or it can be said that this palace itself is a work of art. Long N landed in front of the gate of the ice crystal palace, lowered his wings, and let the two women on his back walk down to the ground. Standing on both sides of the gate, the cloud giants, who were 6 meters tall, with sharp faces, 3-dimensional muscles and grey skin, like plaster sculptures, pushed open the door and bowed to Long N and his party. Kirelia raised her right hand and said, "Welcome to the Silver Castle. Please come in." Long N saw that the gate was 17 or 18 meters high, which was completely enough for a real dragon to pass through, so he did not transform into a human form like Vidalpin, but folded his wings and walked into the ice crystal palace. After entering the gate and passing through the corridor with hundreds of exquisite oil paintings and various artistic sculptures, Long N came to the hall of the ice crystal palace under the guidance of Kirelia. Long N looked up and saw a super large silver dragon with a body length of nearly 30 meters at the end of the hall, with a dome of more than 20 meters high and an area of nearly 1,000 square meters. Under the illumination of the gorgeous ice crystal chandelier hanging from the dome, the silver dragon was shining with bright silver light, as if it was made of the purest silver coins. There were no treasures piled up beside him, only various exquisite works of art were placed in the display cabinets at the edge of the hall. After all, it is rare for a real dragon like Long N to summon subordinates and meet visitors in the bedroom, where treasures are piled up and used for sleeping. Long N's first impression of the silver dragon in front of him was huge, beautiful, elegant, and noble. The huge silver dragon raised its head and looked at Long N with pupils like melting and flowing pure silver. Long N made eye contact with him and stared at the unpredictable eyes. He had another impression of him: wisdom. "Father." Kirelia waved her hand in dissatisfaction to show her presence, causing the giant silver dragon to look away with a smile and look at Kirelia. "How does it feel to be injured? Did you have a good trip?" Facing the giant silver dragon's undisguised ridicule, Kirelia puffed up her cheeks and rolled her eyes, looking at her father speechlessly, causing the silver dragon to laugh in a low and happy voice. The silver dragon stopped laughing and said, "Sorry, two little guests, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Latheronis. You can also call me by my name, the Pure Silver Eye." As he spoke, Latheronis stretched out his claws and lifted up Kirelia's injured left arm with his 2 claws and shook it, causing part of her limbs to uncontrollably change back to the form of a real dragon, and the almost completely broken dragon wing hung low on the ground. Latheronis pulled open the dragon wing with a big hole in it, and after taking a look, he released several 7th level high-level healing spells limb regeneration in succession. In the big hole on Kirelia's dragon wing, the missing bones, blood vessels, and muscles grew rapidly, filling the hole completely. Skin and scales grew on the surface of the muscles. The new scales were darker than the original ones, and the regrown muscles had not yet fully adapted to the coordination. Kirelia flapped her dragon wings a few times, and when she felt that there was no problem, she retracted the dragon wings and returned to her human form. Just as Latheronis looked at Long N and was about to say something, a powerful dragon's might suddenly swept across the crystal palace. The moment she felt this dragon's might, the gorgeous and majestic folds on Latheronis's neck, like silver ribbons, immediately softened, and her face became a headache. "Latheronis, why didn't you tell me that my daughter was back? I need an explanation." A tall and elegant young lady in a gorgeous dress flapped the huge silver dragon wings on her back and flew from a closing space crack to the silver castle. The person hadn't arrived yet, but the voice had arrived first. The cloud giant guarding the gate opened the gate silently, as if he saw nothing and heard nothing. The noble lady landed on the ground, the dragon wings behind her disappeared, and she lifted her skirt with both hands and strode through the corridor leading to the hall. When she approached the hall and saw Long and Vidalpin, the noble lady immediately slowed down her pace and naturally lowered her skirt, like an elegant noble whose etiquette was impeccable. The noble lady looked at Long, the strange-looking blue real dragon, for a few more times, and then focused her eyes on Curelia. Lydia, my daughter, are you injured? The noble lady teleported directly to Curelia's side, grabbed her left arm and raised it, looking at the place where the arm connected to the back. The noble lady easily detected the remaining healing spells on Curelia's body, and her face changed from nervous to serious, and a breeze wrapped in ice and snow rolled up beside her. Long saw Curelia's mother's expression and thought to himself that she was doomed. Long's heart, which had just been relieved, because Lathronis did not pursue the matter of Curelia's injury, was lifted up again. His scalp tensed up, and he broke out in a cold sweat. Chapter 60. Life is not easy. The young dragon sighs. Curelia looked at her angry mother helplessly and explained softly, I accidentally encountered an incarnation of the deep hell demon, and suffered a few minor injuries. My father has helped me heal it. Minor injuries? Broken wings is still a minor injury? Even if it is healed, what if the bones and muscles that grow back are not good looking? What if the flying speed slows down? The wind and snow around the lady became stronger. Where is the incarnation of the deep hell demon? I'm going to kill it now. Curelia said, the incarnation of the demon has been destroyed. The lady was surprised to hear this, and her anger calmed down a little. It was this friendly and lawful blue dragon who destroyed the demon incarnation. His name is Long. Curelia took the opportunity to introduce the two dragons who came to visit the Silver Castle for the first time. This is a golden dragon friend I met in the human kingdom. His name is Vidalpin. The noble lady took another look at this strange looking blue dragon, who was muscular and handsome, especially the black dragon horns on his head that looked like a crown, which made him look noble and majestic. The noble lady smiled gently and said, nowadays, there are few young dragons as handsome and powerful as you. It is really rare for a 5-colored dragon to defeat the incarnation of the deep hell demon with the strength of a young dragon. Curelia only said that Long had destroyed the demon incarnation that hurt her, but did not say that the collision with the demon incarnation was because of Long. Long felt relieved that the blame on his head had been removed. The relaxed Long added, Madam, that hell demon had just arrived and had not yet adapted to the rules of the main material world, and its incarnation was not yet fully mature, so I killed it. The noble lady heard this and showed a look of understanding, and her smile became a little gentler. Even so, it is not easy. Don't be arrogant. You are a good child. Hearing the noble lady's praise, Vidalpin on the side couldn't help but sigh and interrupted, His Majesty Bahamut thinks so too. Huh. The noble lady was stunned, and then looked at Long carefully, only to find that among the blue scales on Long's neck, there was a silver white scale that was deliberately restrained. Blessing of the dragon god. The noble lady suddenly felt that she couldn't understand this world. A teenage dragon and a 5-colored dragon was blessed by His Majesty Bahamut, the metal dragon god. Good young dragon, you are lucky to be favored by His Majesty Bahamut. May goodness and justice always be with you. The noble lady encouraged Long with a pious look, using the prayer of the metal dragon god believers. Long lowered his head. Thank you for your favor, His Majesty Bahamut, and thank you for your praise. The noble lady heard the casualness and indifference in Long's words, and suddenly felt a little confused. Does this guy really have a little faith in His Majesty Bahamut? If not, why can he get the blessing of His Majesty Bahamut? If he can get the blessing of His Majesty Bahamut like this, then what are the believers and even fanatics of His Majesty Bahamut? The noble lady immediately interrupted her thoughts. She couldn't think too much. If she thought about it again, she would be blasphemous. Ahem. Lathronis coughed lightly. Since you are here, you should go and chat with Killy and Miss Vidalpin first. I have something to say to Long. Hearing Lathronis' words, the noble lady had a cold face and snorted indifferently, but she seemed to remember something and didn't ask any more questions. She took Curelia and Vidalpin to the side hall on the side of the hall suitable for human rest. Something to tell me? Long was a little confused. He was sure that this was the first time he and Lathronis met, and there was no intersection between the two dragons. What could Lathronis say to him? It was impossible that after his wife and children left, Lutheranos would suddenly burst into tears and hug Longen, saying that he was actually the illegitimate child born from the mistake Lutheranos made with a blue dragon when he was young. This was too ridiculous, and Longen felt a chill in his heart. Could it be that he was asked to be responsible for his daughter? Well, he is still a young dragon less than 1 year old. Isn't this inappropriate? Let me introduce myself again. My name is Lutheranos, known as the Pure Silver Eye, or God's Blessed One. Lutheranos said seriously. No, uncle, I think I'm a little too anxious. Nothing. Lutheranos. Well, Longen's thick dragon scales and face concealed his embarrassment. So it was His Majesty Bahamut's that asked you to invite me to the Silver Castle as a guest? Lutheranos nodded, then shook his head. I felt it when His Majesty Bahamut blessed you. As one of the dragons closest to him, I can feel every one of his favored people in this world. His Majesty Bahamut is certainly aware of this. Lutheranos said, I have never figured out why His Majesty Bahamut would bless a 5-color blue dragon who only has awe of him, but no faith in him, but there must be a deep meaning behind this. And inviting you to be my guest is not only to satisfy my curiosity, but also because His Majesty Bahamut needs me to warn you about something you should know. Long pricked up his ears. The blessing of His Majesty Bahamut is not only your luck, but also your training. A 5-colored dragon blessed by His Majesty Bahamut will not be favored by His Majesty Shyamut. He will even punish you for betraying him, and the 5-colored dragon. Given his character, the punishment will most likely be to torture you and then kill you directly and throw your head in front of His Majesty Bahamut's kingdom. Although Longen had expected it, he still felt cold in his heart when he thought of such a scene, which was colder than the silver castle made of ice crystals. But the platinum dragon god would definitely not harm him, and there should be other ways to make up for it. Lutheranos added, in order to prevent the excess of divine grace from being directly noticed by Majesty Shyamut, Majesty Bahamut cannot establish a strong connection with you. The scales given to you can only cut off the natural weak connection between you and Majesty Shyamut, except for some minor uses. As long as you don't pray to Majesty Shyamut on your own, or are told to him by other Majesty Shyamut's believers, you don't have to worry. It's too late. Longen was sweating wildly. His name had just been spread out. Fortunately, it hadn't been checked by Shyamut yet. I hope it can be remedied. Longen decided to hide when he returned, and resolutely not to be as ostentatious as before. Moreover, he had to deliberately spread a little bad reputation to cover up the label of the favored one of the platinum dragon god that had not yet been fully established. Longen felt a little tired after accidentally offending a god. Is this really the pressure that a young dragon less than 1 year old should bear? Life is not easy. The author also sighs, begging for votes. Kowtow, kowtow. Friends who have not invested can also invest. 100 investment can get a small recommendation. Now only need 10 or so. Chapter 61 Lost. Lutheranos looked at Longen with a slightly amused look on his face, and said with a smile, since when has the favor of God become a matter of distress to dragons? Cheer up, young dragon. Seize this opportunity. What you can get is definitely worth your effort. Lutheranos spread his wingspan of more than 30 meters, and his scales were shining. Like me, I'm only 329 years old, but I'm about to enter the level of a giant dragon. Most silver dragons have to be over 600 years old to grow to this level. This Lutheranos is as elegant and polite as a nobleman, but he seems a little overconfident, or proud, which is quite rare among silver dragons. Although with his age and strength, he does have capital to be proud of. Lutheranos folded his wings on his back, and said to Longen, looking at your current size, you should be almost 30 years old, right? Don't worry, if nothing else, you will definitely become a super large dragon before you are 60. The size of a super large dragon is 18 to 30 meters. Normally, it takes 70 to 80 years for a real dragon to grow into a super large dragon, and a white dragon needs hundreds of years. A super large dragon in its 50s can be considered quite young. But Longen was very upset, thinking that Lutheranos seemed to be cursing him. Actually, I just hatched this year. 60 years to grow to super large size. Who are you insulting? Lutheronus said as if he had heard a funny joke. It's a pity that I can't leave here. Otherwise I would definitely introduce you to a Partendin, who is a copper dragon, but you tell jokes much better than him. Lutheronus chuckled for a while, and seeing that Longen looked serious and didn't look fake, he asked hesitantly, "Are you really only 1 year old?" Longen thought about it and counted the time when he was just born, eating and sleeping, and said, "To be precise, it's 6 months." Lutheronus, is this the reason why His Majesty Bahamut chose him? Who would believe a 13-meter long dragon? Lutheronus sighed with mixed feelings. Perhaps in 1,000 years, this blue dragon will grow up to be able to guard His Majesty Bahamut's throne and follow his figure to participate in the battle between gods. A natural warrior with unlimited potential. This is Lutheronus' definition of Longen. In that case, I don't have to worry about you. I only need to give you a few more decades, and you will probably be able to face the followers of Majesty Tiamat alone, or even face the incarnation of Majesty Tiamat directly. Longen also sighed. How many more decades? How long will this hard life last? After a short conversation, Lutheronus invited Longen to dinner. In the wide hall, the huge silver dragon squatted in the host's seat, and the unhappy lady sat at the table for humans with Curelia and Vidalpin. Longen squatted on the other side of the hall, opposite them. One by one, the cloud giants with grey skin like plaster sculptures, and tied hair floating like clouds brought silver tabler and plates to the host and guests. The first dish served was made with the cooking methods of humans and elves. Except that the portion was several times larger. The taste and appearance were very authentic. Usually, silver dragons like to walk in the world in the form of humans or elves to observe the lives and habits of these small creatures. They are also keen to taste human and elf food, and especially like to try new dishes. Most silver dragons will travel for hundreds of years as humans and elves, so that most of them habitually use human and elf food as their staple food. Even after they finish their journey, they will still use it to recall the good memories of their travels. Some of the silver dragon clans that live together will even hold cooking competitions to kill their long and boring lives. But these foods obviously cannot fill the stomachs of real dragons. The cloud giants brought up a head of purple alfalfa roasted beef and placed it in front of Longen, Vidalpin and Lutheronus. The roasted beef placed in front of Longen was also electrocuted with lightning spells in advance, which can be said to be very attentive. After the dinner, Longen said goodbye, and Lutheronus did not keep him. It was just that Curelia had just returned home, so Longen asked her and Vidalpin to stay for a while longer, just as a paid vacation for them. After being sent out of the silver castle by the dragons, Longen flapped his wings and flew into the sky. A torn gap had been opened in advance, and he could see the magnificent sea outside. Longen rushed out of the gap at an accelerated speed, and the snowflakes on his scales quickly melted in the sunlight shining directly on the sea surface. Longen looked back at the place where he had just flown out, but found nothing. He sighed again that the secondary element space was convenient. Longen thought of the elemental end in his hand, and his heart suddenly became hot. As long as he could open this book, he would have the opportunity to have such a secret base camp. Longen immediately wanted to go home, and just wanted to fly back to the dragon's nest, and continue to try to open the first page of Elemental End. Then, he was unfortunately lost. The vast sea was only full of unpredictable waves, and the only islands that could be used as markers were far apart. If the direction of advance deviated slightly, it would be a small mistake to the next island, and 1,000 miles away. Without Curelia's guidance, a blue dragon who couldn't bring himself to go back to ask for directions could only fly forward in the direction of the Onia continent. After flying for a day and a night, Longen finally found a fleet. Longen's arrival caused the fleet to panic, but they obviously had rich experience in dealing with real dragons. The dragon hunting crossbows were turned around and aimed at Longen, who was approaching quickly. Longen, who wanted to ask for directions, felt a strong threat from the crossbow arrows as thick as an adult's arm, so he could only stop helplessly and bypass the fleet. Seeing the fleet means that they are close to the land. They only need to fly forward for a while and reach the land country, so they can easily find someone to ask for directions, Longen thought. But a few hours later, the situation in front of him was somewhat beyond his expectations. In front of him was a large area of islands stretching to the horizon. These large and small islands were scattered all over the place, and buildings of different styles were piled on the islands. Single-masted, three-masted, five-masted, and various sailing ships shuttled and moored among them. Woo! A low and long horn sounded, and one sailboat after another left the port in the sunset. A vigorous vitality made Long N's eyes bright. As a real dragon, his intuition told him that this place must be prosperous and rich. But Long N was also confused in his heart. Where the hell did I get lost? Question mark? Chapter 62, The Thousand Islands and the Spell Scale. Most of the ships we met before sailed out from here. Those ships were equipped with weapons that could threaten real dragons. The threat of this archipelago to Long N was definitely higher than that of the ships. Wait, is this the archipelago strait known as a country of thousand islands? Long N recalled the record in a travelogue, in which the description of countless white sails shuttling between the islands was exactly the same as what Long N saw. The Thousand Islands is located in the archipelago strait between the northeast of the Roman Empire in the northernmost part of the Ionian continent and the Runnian continent. Due to the special geographical conditions, this sea area has never had a definite ownership. It is a real lawless zone, attracting countless merchants, pirates, adventurers, mercenaries, and fugitives from Alnia or Unia to gather here. Every day, hundreds of ships stop here to rest, making the business of this archipelago extremely prosperous, and giving rise to a large number of bandits and mercenaries. No one here cares about your origin. As long as you are loyal to gold coins, and have enough strength, you can get a good job, such as a guard or a pirate. You can see all kinds of intelligent creatures in this sea, from humans to kowtow fishmen, from elves to liches, everything is available. Is this the legendary Thousand Islands country with gold flowing in the sea? Long N said, since we are already here, why not go and see how prosperous the business here is? Long N turned around and flew to the sea far away from the archipelago, avoiding the ship and falling into the sea, and performed the four-ring transformation spell, transforming into a big fish and diving into the archipelago. On a small island where only a sloop was docked, a blue-scaled dragon descendant covered in a linen robe walked out from an unwatched corner of the coast, and the moisture on the robe and body quickly evaporated. Long N, who had easily mixed in, walked casually on this island that was less than the size of a small town. On both sides of the road were various 2- or 3-story taverns, hotels, casinos, brothels, and restaurants. There were many customers in each store. This is just an island in the Thousand Islands country that is not in the mainstream. The business is so prosperous, and those larger islands can be imagined. A middle-aged human woman, dressed in exaggeratedly gorgeous clothes, stood in front of a 3-story building covered with pink ribbons, fanning herself with a purple goose down fan, greeting the guests coming in and out. Suddenly, her eyes lit up, and she walked quickly to Long's side. Oh, he powerful and handsome dragonborn, are you looking for a place to stay overnight? Long glanced at the woman, said nothing, and continued to walk forward without stopping. The woman twisted her plump figure and followed Long without giving up. Guest, I think you will not have the heart to reject a lonely scale human girl. The scale human's body was covered with scales of varying sizes, which was very consistent with the aesthetics of the dragonborn, but Long still did not stop. So what about the snake girl? What about humans? Cat people? Lizard people? Ogres? There are really many kinds, but aren't lizard people and ogres a little? Long N shook his head helplessly and released a little dragon power to scare the slow-strength human, warning her not to follow him again. Long N continued to move forward, not noticing the viciousness in the eyes of the middle-aged woman behind him. Long N threw out a silver coin, took the charcoal grilled fish handed over by the vendor, and then twisted off the third arm that wanted to steal the purse on his waist, leaving the thief rolling on the ground wailing. Long N stuffed the whole grilled fish into his mouth and pulled out the wooden stick. The charcoal grilled fish, which was brushed with a special hot and sour sauce and sprinkled with seaweed, was fragrant and spicy, with a moderate sour and spicy degree, and had a completely different flavor from the Principality of Balan. After chewing the grilled fish in his big mouth with the fish bones, Long N suddenly realized that 2 creatures had been following him closely. Long N changed a few stalls, as if nothing had happened, and continued to taste the food he had just bought. After confirming that the two creatures were still following him, Long held a piece of barbecue in his mouth, untied his belt, and walked into a deep alley. A tall human who had been staring at Long looked at a thin gnoll, quickly followed him, and turned into the alley that Long had just walked into. What a stupid dragonborn, daring to wander around alone. This mission is too easy, the gnoll whispered to his companion. The human beside him laughed disdainfully. The brains of dragonborn are not much better. Just like their balls are bigger than their brains, they can get sexually interested in anything and give birth to them. Arrogant and stupid. Really? The human and the gnoll, who were walking side by side, turned around in an instant, only to find that Long, who should have been in front of them, appeared behind them. While Long used an illusion to hide himself, he also created an illusion of himself and walked into the alley, easily tricking the two guys who were following him into it. Long crossed his arms, with a smile on his ferocious dragon mouth. Do you want to tell me now, or should I beat you half to death first? The gnolls and humans on the opposite side did not say a word, drew their weapons, and rushed towards Long. Then these two guys with good strength were instantly knocked to the ground by Long with his terrifying speed and strength. The fallen human wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth in horror, wondering why the power of this dragonborn was so terrifying. Seeing Long take a step forward, the man hurriedly said, I say, we are. Bang! A blue scaled fist as big as a sandbag hit his face. After a round of punches and kicks and the man's gradually fading screams of pain, Long grabbed the tail of the gnoll who wanted to escape and dragged it back directly. The gnoll looked at his companion who was beaten beyond recognition, swallowed his saliva and said, we are. No hurry. Long grinned, showing his fangs. I have already given you the opportunity to choose. Since you chose the latter, I will beat you half to death first. I always keep my word and my main point is honesty and trustworthiness. Under the gnoll's terrified eyes, a blue scaled fist quickly grew larger, and screams followed. So someone is targeting me, and they want to capture me to draw blood, and use the blood of the dragonborn, to pass it off as the blood of a real dragon to make huge profits. Long shook his head. This place is too messy. It's terrible that you can be targeted by dragon dealers, even if you take a walk. Crack. Long stepped on the heads of the two guys in front of him. An eyeball with a strong sense of doubt was squeezed and ejected, hitting the wall and bounced back, rolling to Long's feet. Long smiled and said to the eyeball, I said I would beat you half to death first, but I didn't say you can live after you finish talking. Clapping his hands, Long said to the empty alley, do you come out by yourself, or do I have to find you? A tall and graceful figure quickly emerged in the empty alley. The person stared at Long's fist, as if ready to escape. As soon as Long made a move, Long looked at the humanoid creature in front of him, and his expression gradually became a little weird. The exaggerated black leather jacket with a lot of metal spikes and chains, the tight leather pants deliberately torn to reveal the thighs, the fiery red long hair was trimmed into a hedgehog shape with hair oil, and a strand of hair covered the right eye. Long looked at this weird guy and almost swore directly, shouting, fuck, non-mainstream. Clearing the strange thoughts in his head, Long saw the exposed skin on her face and neck, and the skin was covered with a layer of fine scales. Scaled man? Are you their accomplice? Long asked. Non-mainstream shook his head, his spiked hair swaying, and the earrings on his ears jingled. Don't blame the good people. Are all you dragonborn so unreasonable? I just wanted to help you. Non-mainstream complained. Besides, I'm a spell scale, not a scaled man. Spell scale? Long was stunned for a moment, and suddenly remembered this rare species. Whether they are willing to admit it or not, warlocks and spellcasters have a thin layer of dragon blood in their bodies, which is why they can perform some simple innate spells like real dragons. When two warlocks combine, their blended dragon blood may awaken and mutate, turning their children into creatures between humans and dragonborn. Unlike the extremely low probability of mutation of human warlocks, in the spell scale tribe, the combination of spell scales and spell scales will inevitably give birth to spell scale babies, and they will not mutate into humans in reverse. Therefore, most of the spell scales that can be seen are from the spell scale tribe. The magic scale is a strange race. Each magic scale has its own unique aesthetics. They will also make strange clothes for this purpose. Just like the magic scale in front of Long. To Long, her outfit is simply weird. Help me? Long N smiled and said, then tell me why you want to help me. There must be a reason, right? Because you are handsome. The magic scale answered seriously. Hearing this, Long N nodded approvingly and said, you are very honest. I believe your reason. You can leave now. Long N turned around and was about to leave, but the magic scale behind him hurriedly caught up. Long N turned around, pointed at the two headless corpses on the ground, squinted his eyes, and looked at the magic scale and said, why are you still following me? Do you want to become like them? The magic scale stopped and smiled. You can't catch me. I'm a high level wizard. Oh. Long N aimed all his dragon power at the magic scale. The powerful dragon power made her nervous. Long N scared Falin and turned away, but the Falin followed him. Long N turned around and looked at Falin impatiently and said, why are you still following me? What do you want to do? Unexpectedly, the Falin stuck out his neck and shouted boldly at Long N, you are so handsome. I fell in love with you at first sight. I want to propose to you. Long N. Because of my graduation project, I went to bed at 2 o'clock, got up at 6:30, and was busy at school all day. I came back and started writing at 7:30, but I have only managed to write more than 3,000 words until now. I can't bear it anymore. My eyelids have been fighting, so I will just post it in one chapter today. I'm sorry to the big guys who voted for me. I kowtow to you. I won't ask for votes today. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. Chapter 63 Artillery. Are all spell scales like this? They started to show their love boldly within 3 minutes of meeting. Long N felt that he had met a female hooligan and a non-mainstream female hooligan. Sorry, I'm not interested in you. Long N turned around and walked away and quickened his pace, not wanting to have anything to do with this non-mainstream person who suddenly appeared. The spell scale also took a long and strong step and followed Long N closely. Give it a try, handsome guy. I really have feelings for you. My name is Philulis. Handsome guy. What's your name? Handsome guy. You are so cool. I like you who are handsome and cool. Handsome guy. Your outfit has a magical and surrealist feel. Handsome guy. Do you know anything about fashion trends? Have you studied the 7th ring spell of spell reversal? Which of its 6 classic construction models do you think is the best? Long N walked faster and faster, but the annoying voice behind him never went away. As a spell scale, Philulis also has a strong physique. At least it is no problem for her to walk or run fast for a long time. As Long's speed increased, she began to trot, then gradually accelerated to a fast run until her running speed could not catch up with Long's walking speed, and then cast spells such as foot oiling and wind walk to easily catch up with Long. On the street, a blue dragonborn walked quickly and squeezed through the crowd, and a strangely dressed scaly man ran closely behind it, causing a lot of chaos and curses. Some people wanted to fight, but they gave up the idea in front of the powerful strength shown by the two. The island is not large, and the two people ran and chased each other and soon reached the edge of the island. Long could already see the coast between the houses and buildings. He stopped suddenly, and Floris, who was still muttering, hit him directly on the back. The hard metal spikes and chains on Floris's clothes hit Long's scales, but did not hurt Long at all. Instead, due to the force of the collision, they squeezed back and hit Floris herself. Floris felt that her body was full of nails, and she screamed and rolled on the ground in pain. Long N. Why does this thing look so unintelligent? Why did you stop so suddenly? It hurts so much. Long N was made to laugh by the female spell scale in front of him. Who told you to follow the car so closely? You didn't keep a safe distance. The car behind you is fully responsible for the rear end collision. Don't blame me. After hearing Long N's words, Floris didn't feel the pain instantly, but looked at Long N with shining eyes. This male dragonborn is so interesting. Not only does he look interesting, but he also speaks interestingly. Long N's short sentences and words made by force made Floris feel very interesting, and made her more determined to pursue Long N. Handsome, you finally agreed to talk to me. You agreed, right? Right? Long N, the non-mainstream female hooligan, had a headache. After thinking for a while, she said, I can't accept your directness. Otherwise, let's spend a few days together and see if it's suitable. With the nature of the spell scale's interest coming and going quickly, it might not take long for this non-mainstream spirit girl to lose interest in him. If she doesn't lose interest in him, it can also make her relax, and he can take the opportunity to slip away. Anyway, Long N only plans to stay here for 2 days and then leave. Yeah. Fululis jumped up from the ground and took Long N's arm. Wow. Honey, you are so strong. I like it so much. Long N. The spell scale is really perverted, worthy of being a species of the chaotic camp. Adjusting his mentality, Long N calmly took Fululis's arm and walked towards her residence under her guidance. Are you also traveling to the Thousand Islands? Fululis leaned against Long's arm, rubbing her soft scaly body against Long's arm. Then we are really destined to meet. I just traveled to the Thousand Islands from Runia not long ago. Are you from Runia? Long asked. The two had always communicated in dragon language before. Fululis nodded and said, my tribe is in the north of Runia. I was too bored staying in the tribe, so I came out to travel. The world outside is really much more exciting. It turns out that Runia is not all wetlands and swamps like the north. It turns out that the sea looks like this. Let me tell you, the Runians have created something like the magic crystal cannon, but the iron barrel uses goblin explosives. Although the power is much smaller than the magic crystal cannon, iron and explosives are much cheaper than magic alloys and magic crystals. Also, I passed by a country in Runia, and the human noble females there actually wore clothes that expose their mammary organs. They seem to compete with each other for the size, shape, and color of their mammary organs. It's really strange. No matter how strange it is, it's just like that compared to you magic scales. Long N complained silently, but his mind drifted elsewhere. The Runians have already created cannons that use explosives. I wonder if it has been passed on to the human kingdom of Onia. Although this world has magic crystal cannons and sentinel crystals, the cost of making them is very high. The magic crystal cannons put thousands of gold coins into the barrels for each shot. In a fierce war, the magic crystal cannons alone would consume 200,000 to 300,000 gold coins. Therefore, these powerful weapons are usually stored in collected dust, but they are of no use if they are replaced with iron barrels and cheap explosives. As long as the quantity reaches a certain level, they can also cause qualitative changes through quantitative changes, and play a significant role in war. In order to improve the strength of the territory clan, Long N must build cannons, and he must build them in large quantities. There is no way Long N has a phobia of insufficient firepower brought from China. In addition, the appearance of cannons also proves that this world has something in common with the world of the previous life. Except for the existence of magic power, the rest of the material rules are very similar. Since cannons can be made, can firearms also be made? These things are not powerful enough, so what about combining cannons, firearms and spells? Turning spells into triggered artillery bullets, using artillery to cast high-level spells, and using submachine guns that spew low-level spells to kill people on the battlefield. The picture is very martial. Going a little further, is the periodic table of element in this world consistent with the previous life? Is there uranium in this world? Is it feasible to build atomic bombs and hydrogen bombs? If this thing is built, wouldn't it be equivalent to being able to throw legendary spells at will? These need further verification. Long N just wants to build the cannon first. After all, with the current level of technology, other things are completely impossible to build. After walking for a while, the two came to a single-family 2-story stone brick house. Stone bricks are a relatively expensive building material here, and such a house is very expensive. Long N looked at Fululis. Is this your house? Yes, the original owner of this house wanted to capture me and sell it, but I killed him. Now of course this house is mine. Fululis dragged Long N towards the house. Come on. Follow me into the house. Chapter 64. Another. Good morning, dear. How about my dress? Fululis was suddenly not satisfied with the style of yesterday's clothes. She showed her powerful hands-on ability in clothing making, and made a black evening dress with ribbons all night. Although it was still very strange, it was at least a normal dress. But Fululis used black dye to make a sloppy smoky makeup on her face, which made Long N feel like he had seen a ghost in the morning. The strange and fickle aesthetics are worthy of being a spell scale. Long N casually dealt with Flawless and was about to walk around the Thousand Islands, but heard Flawless say, "Dear, how about accompanying me to a banquet? It's an invitation from the four lords of the Thousand Islands." Although the Thousand Islands have no real belonging and no unified regime, after a long period of chaos, four powerful lords stood up and jointly declared that the Thousand Islands were independent of all forces. Therefore, it was regarded as an independent force by the outside world and was called a country instead of a country. Wait, what does the banquet held by the four leaders of the Thousand Islands have to do with you? Didn't you just arrive here not long ago? Long N asked. Flawless took Long N's arm and said, "They invited all the owners of medium-sized and larger islands to participate in the banquet. The guy I killed is the owner of this island. His invitation letter is in our hands. Of course we have to attend the banquet. This is a role-playing desire of the magic scale." Long N estimated that Flawless is now playing an island owner of the Thousand Islands. Magic scales always like to play people who interest them, such as guards guarding the city, farmers who cultivate the land, bards, knights, merchants and the like. Magic scales usually play various roles throughout their lives, but they are very stubborn and unwilling to play repeated roles. This is related to their nature of liking new things. And magic scales who are keen on living in the present and passionate about what they are doing will concentrate on the role, so she will go to the banquet that the island owner should attend. Long N thought for a moment and thought it would be nice to visit the island owner's banquet of the Thousand Island country. He nodded to Flores. A beautiful carriage had been prepared outside the door. After the two of them arrived at the island's dock in the carriage, they boarded a three-masted sailing ship and headed for the banquet venue. It seemed that Flores had been ready to attend the banquet, but she met Long N the day before and brought Long N along. The three-masted sailing ship passed through the sea between many islands, passing by other sailing ships. When the sky gradually darkened, it finally stopped beside a huge island. Flores, who had been sitting in the cabin, came back to her senses from her boredom, and her eyes lit up again. She was just about to lose interest in playing the role of the island owner. The two walked out of the cabin and walked towards the guard who was receiving the guests. Flores handed over the invitation letter with the name, altered with a feather pen. The guard ignored the traces of alteration, confirmed the authenticity of the invitation letter, and invited the two to the carriage for picking up guests. Long N suddenly became interested in this banquet. It didn't matter whether the name on the invitation was correct or not. As long as you had the invitation, you could attend the banquet. Isn't this a disguised encouragement to fight for invitations? It doesn't matter if you have the right person, just the strong one. The purpose of this banquet made Long N curious. The horses with Warcraft blood pulled the carriage and came to a magnificent stone palace. Long N and Flawless were invited into the palace and walked into the banquet hall, which was already full of ugly, elegant, and mysterious guests, and more guests were coming. The guests in the banquet hall all looked strange. Long N and Flawless, one dragon and one spell scale, were not conspicuous among them and did not attract many people's attention. Flawless directly pulled Long N to the buffet area where there were few people and began to try various novel foods that she had never tried with great interest. It was not until the sky was completely dark and the magic crystal lamp in the banquet hall was lit that four figures appeared above the banquet hall. 4 legends, no wonder they can support the entire Thousand Islands, Long N said, after taking a look at the 4 figures. Among the 4 figures, a skinny figure covered in a gorgeous black robe walked out. It exuded the negative energy of death and darkness. On its head, which was so dry that only a layer of skin was left, 2 green flames jumped in its eye sockets. This was obviously a legendary lich. The legendary lich welcomed everyone with a hoarse and dark voice, and stopped talking nonsense, and went straight to the point. 2 months ago, when I was exploring the elemental space, I found this huge book, but no matter what method I used, I couldn't completely open the book. The words of the legendary lich made Long N frown. The elemental space and the huge book, these 2 things put together made Long N immediately think of the end of the element. The legendary lich activated the storage ring and took out a huge book that looked like it was cast in gold. On the book were several words that Long N didn't recognize. Although he didn't know what language these words were in, Long N guessed the meaning of those words just by looking at the appearance of the book, The End of the Element. The elemental end in the hands of the legendary lich is exactly the same as the one that Ryan gave him, except that the title is in a different language. The same size, the same material, the same carvings. It is simply carved from the same mold. Ryan said in the letter that the ancestor of the Lionheart family who got the elemental end first saw the elemental end placed on the central stone pillar of a huge palace in the fire elemental plane, but was expelled from the elemental plane by a powerful fire elemental lord. Later, when he went to explore the elemental plane again, he encountered space turbulence and was accidentally drawn into the vacuum plane, and then he got the elemental end. It seems that this elemental end is not a unique item, but a wholesale product. I just don't know which elemental plane this elemental end comes from. The lich on the stage continued. At present, our understanding of this book is limited to its name, Elemental End, and it will present different contents depending on who opens it. With the abilities of our four lords, each of us can only turn over 2 pages of this book, but just 2 of these pages have allowed us to obtain some very expensive knowledge. Therefore, I have called you here to see if anyone knows any information about this book, or if anyone among you can open the book. As a reward for opening it, the challenger can obtain the knowledge in it, as well as an island, but the knowledge in the book must be shared with the 4 lords. Long N couldn't open the elemental end brought by Ryan. Not knowing whether this book was easy to turn over, Long N was eager to try. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 65 Escape. The legendary lich stared at everyone with cold green flames in his eyes, and placed the golden giant book on the stand beside him. Does anyone want to try it? The guests of different races and appearances looked at each other, and looked at the golden giant book from time to time. They had never heard of such a thing, and they couldn't guess the true purpose of the legendary lich. In their opinion, if this book can really bring valuable knowledge without any other requirements, why should they share such a treasure with everyone? The flames in the legendary lich's eyes jumped. It didn't want to expose this strange treasure at first, but after using it itself, it ordered its trusted subordinates to open a page of the End of the Element. The content displayed inside made it prefer to make this treasure public and try to open it as much as possible. It first contacted the other 3 legendary lords who maintained the independence of the Thousand Islands together, but the contents revealed by those lords and their subordinates, when they opened the pages of the book, were not what it wanted. I hope to obtain the first half of the life reversal reconstruction ritual. The soul fire of the legendary lich fluctuated, indicating that its emotions were not as calm as its stiff face. It was once a powerful legendary necromancer, but even a legendary life will come to an end. It can only choose to transform itself into a lich to escape the pursuit of death. After successfully transforming into a lich, although it is no longer as fragile and short-lived as a human, its soul has also been infected by the breath of the dead and evil, making it more cold and cruel as time goes by. In the past 50 years, it has even begun to have a bloodthirsty impulse, and its brain has begun to become dull and rigid. This is unbearable for a legendary wizard who was once proud of his wisdom and thinking, so it has been looking for a way to keep its brain and soul awake, or to transform itself into a human again. The life reversal reconstruction ritual it obtained in the final chapter of the element gave it hope. It was a way to perfectly transform it into a living creature again, and even to make its strength go further and break through the limit that it had been unable to cross in its lifetime. But fate seemed to have played a joke on it. Only the second half of the ritual was recorded on that page. It could only use this part to confirm that the ritual was indeed effective, but could not complete it by itself. Now, it could only hope to try its luck in a lottery, hoping that someone would find out the first half of the ritual. The banquet hall was silent for dozens of seconds, and finally a powerful vampire stepped forward and pressed his hand on the edge of the cover of the golden giant book. It mobilized all its strength and struggled to open the cover halfway, revealing the pages underneath, which were also made of gold. The vampire, unable to support himself, retracted his skinny and pale arms, and the golden giant book suddenly closed with a dull metal collision sound. Although only half of the page was opened, its eyes showed unconcealable excitement. Under the gaze of the legendary lich's constantly jumping soul fire, the vampire felt the threat of death. It gradually lowered its head and told the four lords beside it what it had just learned from the book. The legendary lich's dry and stiff face showed no disappointment. He turned his head silently and looked at the next figure who came up. One after another, creatures came forward, but most of them could not open even one page of the golden giant book. It was not only those with strength of level 9 or above who could open it. Several people with strength of level 8 also did this. There was even a 7th ring Murloc warlock who successfully obtained a strange 9th ring spell from it. Fululis walked back to Long En in disappointment, holding Long En's arm and complaining, "I can't open such an interesting thing." Long En smiled. It was a torture for the spell scale to be unable to play with and study something that interested him right in front of him. As fewer and fewer people had tried, the flames in the legendary lich's eyes beat more and more fiercely, and coldness and rage brewed in his mind. At this time, a blue dragonborn came up and placed his claws on the giant book made of gold. Long En's claws touched the elemental end, and the familiar touch made Long En feel that he was touching the book of the Lionheart family. But soon, this illusion disappeared quickly. An item in his storage ring vibrated violently, trying to break through the blockade of the storage ring. It was the elemental end of the Lionheart family. Fuck. Long En cursed in his heart and expressionlessly took his claws away from the elemental end in front of him and was about to turn around and leave. "Why don't you turn it over?" The legendary lich stared at Long En with empty eyes and released a breath of fear that made people lose their minds. But Long En squinted his eyes, seemingly unaffected by this breath. The will of the real dragon is extremely strong, and the fear aura that the lich is born with cannot disturb Long En's will. "I don't think I'm strong enough to turn it over." The flames in the lich's eyes jumped a few times and then returned to calm, waving his hand to let Long En go down, as if nothing had happened. When everyone had finished trying, the people who were not interested in the party dispersed, and Long En also left the palace with Flores and boarded the sailboat for the return trip. As the sailboat moved away from the island, where the party was held in the moonlight, Long En's warning signs became stronger. He took Flores' hand and walked out of the cabin and onto the deck. "Do you want to blow the wind with me on the deck? Darling, you are so romantic." Long En was not in the mood to play the couple role-playing game with Flores. The human-shaped dragonborn body quickly expanded and stretched, turning back into a 13-meter-long blue real dragon. Holding Flores' slender waist with his claws, Long En flapped his wings and flew into the sky amid exclamations. Wow. Flores, who was held in the hands of the real dragon, not only did not feel fear, but looked at Long En's huge and muscular body with stars in her eyes. "Dear, how many surprises do you have that I don't know?" Seeing that Flores was more interested in Long En, "I'm afraid Long En won't be able to get rid of this non-mainstream spiritual sister for a while." Long En suddenly felt a little regretful. He shouldn't have taken Flurry with him, just because he didn't want to implicate her. "Honey, where are you taking me? Your dragon's lair? Should I cry like a princess kidnapped by a dragon? Just like in the drama?" Long En's face was dark as the sense of danger in his heart not only did not dissipate, but became even stronger. He immediately told Flurry that they were being targeted by the legendary lich. At this critical moment of life and death, Flurry also became serious. She scanned Long En's body with her mental power and finally found a hidden soul mark on his body. "It's a soul mark of the 9th ring level. It will take me some time to eliminate it." "Soul type?" Long En took out the higher level soul staff from the storage ring and threw it to Flurry. "Is this useful?" Flurry's eyes lit up. "Of course. Honey." Chapter 66 War Situation. The legendary lich's figure, flying fast, suddenly stopped in midair, and the soul fire in his eyes swayed as if blown by the wind. Just now, the soul mark he had placed on the dragonborn was cracked. Originally, he had noticed that Long En was different and wanted to secretly capture him and interrogate him after Long En left, but he didn't expect that this dragonborn was actually a real dragon. Due to a moment of carelessness, the real dragon escaped too far. It was also because of Long N's escape that the legendary lich was sure that Long N knew the secret of the end of the element. When he thought that the opportunity to completely control and use this strange the end of the element slipped away from his eyes, and the opportunity to get rid of the lich's crazy state passed by him, the legendary lich couldn't help but raise his head in anger. His upper and lower jaws opened to an exaggerated angle, tearing the dry skin and muscles, and emitting an angry and sharp scream. In the sea area near it, on the ships and islands, the heads of those who were not strong enough exploded in the furious roar, and the red and white brains were smeared on the walls or the faces of the people around, causing a great chaos. And the source of all this, Long N had already climbed to an altitude of tens of thousands of meters with Flawless. When Long N thought that he was marked with the soul by the legendary lich, he felt angry and annoyed. The powerful strength of the real dragon and the many victories in this period of time made him forget everything, and he didn't even take a few legends seriously. As a proud real dragon, Long N had no fear in his heart. He was just annoyed by his weakness. He secretly said in his heart, when my strength reaches the legendary level, I must go to the door to kill the lich and snatch the elemental end from it. After escaping from the waters of the Thousand Islands, Long N flew straight to the south, making his plan to visit the Thousand Islands fall through. All the way south, day and night. After changing his figure several times to ask for directions, Long N finally flew back to the territory of Balan with Flawless. Flying over the northern border of the Principality of Balan, Long N frowned at the ruined towns, burned wastelands and woods caused by the war. Before he left Balan, the war was far from being so fierce. What happened in the short 10 days since he left the Principality of Balan? Long N flew to the western border of Balan and found that the war had also spread here. Although the towns were not destroyed, like in the northern border, and large areas of land were burned into a barren land, it was not much better here. Large tracts of farmland looked like they were harvested in advance, and the walled cities were crowded with civilians seeking refuge. Those who could not hide in the city were driven away by war and hunger. Thousands of civilians gathered into a tide of refugees and ran aimlessly, like locusts, eating up the bark and grass roots on the road ahead. In order to avoid the war from the north, these refugees could only go to the south or the border further west. Long N flew over a group of refugees, looking at their grey and thin faces, and their painful and numb eyes. Even Flawless, who had been excited and noisy all the way, fell silent for a rare time. As a real dragon, Long N thought that he would be indifferent to the sufferings of humans, but in the end he had to admit that his heart was not without fluctuations. With his wings flapping, Long N flew a little faster. The revitalized Blackstone town gradually approached. Long N's wide wingspan blocked the flow of the strong wind, allowing him to land smoothly in Blackstone town, on the square built on the ruins. As the huge shadow fell, the civilians around the square knelt down and worshipped Long N. Long N glanced at his statue in the center of the square, put down Flawless, and said to the Minotaur who was kneeling on one knee not far away, "Call Glengo to see me." Before the Minotaur set off, Glengo flew over quickly. Glengo flew to Long N, knelt on the ground, and said, "Great Lord, your servant is always at your service." Long N nodded and said, "Give me the observation records of the war in the Principality of Balan in the past few days." Glengo bowed his head and said, "Yes, Great Master." It took out a stack of papyrus that had been prepared long ago and raised it above its head respectfully. Long N used the dragon's hand to hold the papyrus in front of his eyes, and his eyes quickly swept over the rows of text. After Kirelia left with Vidalpin and Long N, they lost the perfect scout true dragon scout, and their understanding of the situation of the Balan civil war was greatly weakened. But under Long's order, Glengo formed a scout team in advance. This team of untrained tabby people was not professional, but the tabby people's innate talent made them still good scouts. The intelligence they brought back every once in a while was not very important, but at least they were not completely in the dark about the development of the war. The northern rebels accepted the nobles who fled from the capital of Boran, and at the suggestion of the fleeing nobles, they took the initiative to seek help from the Kingdom of Facity, and brought the army of the Kingdom of Facity into the land of the Principality of Boran in the form of employment. However, The northern rebels were unable to control the army of the kingdom of Facity entering Boron, which led to the Facity army looting towns after the war, and even looting and killing nobles, and then pushing it onto the rioting refugees or enemies. In order to resist the strength of the newly added Facity Kingdom support army of the northern rebels, the Grand Duke of Boron finally made up his mind to ask his father, the Grand Duke of Leamington, to send troops. This move caused the Eastern Province, which had been barely safe before, to react violently. Under the banner of protecting the country, they blocked the reinforcement sent by Grand Duke Leamington from the border. After clearing every inch of land in the Eastern Territory in advance, and overdrawing the development potential of the Eastern Territory for the next 10 years, the army under the Marquis of the Eastern Territory burst out with impressive strength, and actually beat the reinforcement of the Principality of Leamington to a halt. Grand Duke Boron has now imposed heavy taxes to pay Leamington's war remuneration. Countless civilians have gone bankrupt and fled under the heavy taxes, and their reinforcement are completely useless in a short period of time, so that the battle line in the north has been pushed forward all the way, and the front line has been pressed to the Batiran plain where the capital of Boron is located. Countless wandering refugees have aggravated the chaos and pressure from the rear of Grand Duke Boron, but they no longer have the extra energy to manage those refugees. Longen piled up the papyrus and put it into the storage ring. He said to Glengo, "Pass my order. Let the dog-headed men and the Minotaurs form a team and take the humans in Blackrock Town to collect the refugees in the Western Territory. The development of my territory requires more people." Glengo understood that more people also meant that its master needed a larger territory. "Yes, Great Master." Glengo nodded respectfully, but reminded, "But if we collect refugees, our food will not be able to support this round of grain harvest." Those human nobles have also announced that they will no longer sell food to the outside world. Longen said expressionlessly, "They will agree." Chapter 67 White Dragon. After a long period of dormancy, Galaxus shook his body, shaking off the ice ridges formed by the cold air from his pure white wings and dragon scales. After stretching his muscles for a while, Galaxus shook his tail with satisfaction. After this sleep, his body length has reached 16 meters, and he is now 102-year-old adult real dragon. Using the tip of his tail to gather a handful of gems accumulated under his body, Galaxus picked up one of the impure diamonds and licked it twice in ecstasy. Then he looked at the pitiful pile of treasures and then at his own body size. Now the great Lord Galaxus needs more treasures so that he can be worthy of a noble adult real dragon. He decided to leave the snowy peak, where he had stayed for more than 80 years, and go to the outside world. Half of the snowmandrill followers he had taken in more than 10 years ago were eaten by him one after another, and the remaining half all escaped during his sleep. The great Lord Galaxus now needs more followers. He wants to establish a territory of his own. After all, he is already an adult real dragon who can stand on his own. The huge white dragon broke through the thick ice that sealed the cave and spread its wings to fly into the snowy sky. It recalled the terrible storm it had seen on the west side of the mountain range and turned to the east side of the mountain range. Galaxus remembered that he had found many kobolds and orcs on the east side of the mountain range, but he was afraid that he would be discovered by humans living at the foot of the mountain, so he did not show up in front of those low-level races to take them as his followers. Now the great Galaxus is no longer afraid of those humans, and these low-level races can be used as the first batch of his followers. Food. After he grows up, the white dragon flew over the snowy peaks and flew eastward. The temperature gradually rose, and the white in the field of vision gradually turned into green. After circling in the sky for a while, Galaxus found a strange town. The town was inhabited by goblins, dwarves, kobolds, and various orcs, but there was no sign of chaos. Galaxus wondered, did all these low-level races unite during the 80 years I've been in the mountains? Galaxus was a smart white dragon. This was evident from the fact that after being expelled by his mother, he chose not to stay in the dangerous snowy wasteland, but instead hid his tracks all the way across the ocean to another continent and lived on this extremely safe mountain. Infant white dragons are generally not very intelligent and are even considered by scholars who study dragons to be not much better than beasts. Galaxus was able to make such a decision and execute it at the time, which was indeed smarter than a dragon. Now that he has grown up, his intelligence is no worse than that of a human. Smart Galaxus sensed something was wrong and decided to lurk outside the town to observe the situation. Galaxus restrained his dragon power, and the pads on his claws made his movements silent, but the color of the white dragon was too conspicuous in the forest, so in order not to be discovered, he did not get too close. Dragon Vein Kobold? Dragon Blood Minotaur? Galaxus frowned. Another real dragon came here? Are these the followers of that real dragon? As Galaxus was wondering, he suddenly saw a huge red real dragon in the town in the distance, which was not much inferior to it, slowly flying into the air. Red dragon. Galaxus shuddered. Although the opponent was smaller than it was a red dragon ranked first in combat power among the 5 colored dragons. Galaxus didn't think he could get away with such a red dragon, and he had already thought of retreating. He slowly moved back, but Galaxus's ice blue pupils were always on the red dragon, afraid of being noticed by the other party. Soon he felt something was wrong. Why does this red dragon look so strange? The short and thick body and limbs, the deformed and thin dragon horns and wings. How could it look like a wild and domineering red dragon? This is a hybrid that somehow absorbed the blood of a real dragon. Galaxus angrily swung his dragon tail and whipped the trees beside him. How dare it defile the great and noble blood of a real dragon? The great Lord Galaxus was almost fooled by this bastard. Egadius was flying slowly over the newly built town, patrolling his territory as ordered by his master, when he suddenly felt a strange dragon's might coming from behind him. Egadius turned around hastily and saw a cone of extremely cold air spraying towards him. He also quickly and subconsciously sprayed out a hot flame to fight it. The flame and the cold air collided with a hissing sound, and a large amount of steaming white mist emerged. A 16-meter tall white dragon let out an angry roar and broke through the white mist and pounced on Egadius. The white dragon threw Egadius, who had not yet figured out what was happening, to the ground from the air, smashing 2 newly built houses. Grangasus breathed out a breath of frost at the ugly head with dragon horns under him, raised his claws and swung his dragon tail, whipping Egadius while cursing. Damn bastard. Bastard who tainted the blood of the true dragon. Such insults made Egadius feel strongly insulted. His short limbs actually burst out with powerful strength, flipping the white dragon on his body, and swung his thick tail violently, slapping the white dragon in the face. The dragon vein dog-headed people and dragon blood minotaur who came quickly gathered around, watching the 2 real dragons, one red and one white, fighting each other, not knowing what to do. The 2 dragons, who were both furious, stuck to each other's bodies tightly, biting each other with their mouths, and whipping with their tails, clawing at each other's flesh, and the pure melee made it impossible for other families to intervene. But Grangasus was a pure real dragon after all, much stronger than Egadius in all aspects. Egadius began to gradually fall into a losing position, and was eventually pressed under Grangasus again. Galaxus swung his claws at Egadius's protruding eyeballs, but was barely dodged, leaving 3 claw marks under Egadius's eyeballs. Unsatisfied, Galaxus butted Egadius's head, knocking Egadius dizzy. Galaxus raised his head and roared, laughing, "Damn bastard. Your territory and family now belong to the great Lord Galaxus." From a distance, Longen, who was flying towards the dragon's nest, sensed a reckless and unfamiliar dragon power. He accelerated forward and saw an unfamiliar white dragon riding on Egadius. Beside the 2 dragons was a large area of ruins after the battle. "Damn bastard. Your territory and family now belong to the great Lord Galaxus." Longen. Lightning flashed between the scales, and Longen came like lightning, sending the still laughing white dragon flying more than 10 meters away. Feeling a sharp pain in his side, Galaxus flew into the air and turned several times in the air in a daze. He smashed several houses and fell heavily to the ground. Then, he felt an irresistible force pinching his neck, forcing him to turn his head and look at the source of the force. A majestic blue dragon showed its ferocious fangs and breathed a breath of thunder at his head. Galaxus, who was numbed by the electric current, only heard the blue dragon say, "Come to rob my territory? Who the hell are you calling a bastard?" Galaxus wanted to cry. He wanted to say that this was all a misunderstanding. Recommended books. The author of The Dragon Who Controls Time has published a new book, The Legendary Epic of the Ancestor of the Powerful Dragon, Emperor Dragon. Don't miss it. If you like dragon literature, go and read it. Chapter 68 Dragon Nest Guard. That's it. Then I fought with your clan, and then you came. In Long's dragon nest, Galanxus shrank his neck, lying on the ground with his head in his claws, looking at Long with a submissive and fearful look, and occasionally glancing at the piles of gold coins and gems under Long. Originally, Galanxus was not convinced, thinking that this shameful and despicable blue dragon had attacked him. But when Long beat it up and let it go, Galanxus, who tried to fight back, was defeated by Long head on and beaten up. Galanxus had to admit that the 13-meter long blue dragon in front of him was a freak. Whether it was strength, speed, or defensibility, it was much stronger than a 16-meter long white dragon. Galanxus could not help but have a trace of self-doubt and denial. Is the gap between the white dragon and the other 5 colored dragons really that big? Am I really a true dragon? But there is no doubt that after being beaten, Galanxus can still distract himself to covet the treasure of the dragon that beat him. Galanxus is definitely a greedy 5-colored true dragon. Long unfolded his wings and squatted on the gold coins, with his dragon tail in a circle in front of him, examining the white dragon in front of him. Although compared with other true dragons, the white dragon is much weaker, but it is still a true dragon after all, and its fighting power is not comparable to ordinary creatures. It is not bad to stay and be a thug. Galanxus. Longen looked at the white dragon and said seriously. Hearing his name, the white dragon also looked up at Longen pitifully. You broke into my territory without permission, offended my dignity, injured my subordinates, destroyed my territory, and caused me immeasurable losses of reputation and property. How do you think you should compensate me? Galanxus' already shrunken neck twitched for a while, and he covered his head in pain. With a look of extreme regret, he spat out a small pile of gems from his mouth. Respected blue dragon, I'm willing to give away all my treasures, and hope to get your forgiveness. Longen rolled up a white crystal covered with saliva with his tail, shook it away in disgust, and said, do you think I need these inferior and broken gems of yours? Galanxus felt greatly humiliated, but he couldn't refute it, because any gem taken out of Longen's treasure pile was much more shiny and expensive than the gem it offered. Not wanting to be beaten, it could only lower its head and humbly ask Longen, respected blue dragon, I can't take out more treasures, but if you can give me some time. No, Mr. Grongesus, I don't have extra time to give you, and you are not completely unable to take out anything, right? Longen raised the corner of his mouth, stared at Grongesus' eyes, and said, for example, your body. Grongesus shuddered with a chill, and moved back in fear. True dragons have eyes that can find beauty in everything, so it is not uncommon for some true dragons to find beauty in their own sex. But Grongesus would rather hand over all his treasures than sell his body. It spit out a pile of hidden gems from its mouth, including expensive gems such as diamonds and black amber. Respected blue dragon, these are really all my property. I don't want to be with my own sex. Longen's face was full of black lines, and he wanted to whip the white dragon's head with his tail. What are you thinking about? I want you to become my dragon nest guard and be loyal to me. Dragon nest guards need to give up their dignity and freedom and guard the dragon nest for the contractor wholeheartedly. Guard the treasure in the dragon nest or execute the contractor's orders. This treatment can be said to be no different from slaves. Usually only powerful old dragons or stronger beings will recruit other weaker real dragons as their dragon nest guards. It is very rare for a teenager like Longen to recruit a real dragon larger than himself as a guard. Hearing Longen's words, Galanxus was relieved. Compared with its horrible conjecture, becoming a dragon nest guard didn't seem to be something particularly difficult to accept. Grongesus rolled his eyes and said, noble and powerful blue dragon, it is of course no problem for me to be your dragon nest guard. Whether it is your strength or the treasure you possess, you deserve to be your dragon nest guard. I'm willing to be your dragon nest guard and give you 20 years of freedom. Longen looked at Grongesus with a look of a fool. 100 years. Grongesus' tone stagnated, and he said weakly, I think 30 years is good. 150 years. Grongesus was stunned for a moment. Shouldn't bargaining be lowered? Why didn't he play by the rules? Grongesus came back to his senses and hurriedly said, 50 years. 200 years. Grangusis couldn't help it and shouted helplessly and depressed, okay, you win. 100 years is 100 years. Longen smiled and said, then let's sign the contract. A contract was written in an instant, and Longen left his own mark on it. The contract flew to Grangusis, and it caught it with its dragon claws, and carefully looked at the items on the contract. 150 years. Grangusis' teeth creaked. If it hadn't been for the defeat, it would have beaten this hateful blue dragon to pieces. Grangusis stared at Longen fiercely, sighed weakly, and could only comfort himself that it was not 200 years after all. He signed his name on the contract in a rotten way. The contract quickly dissipated in the air, attracting the gaze of a loving, kind, and righteous gaze. Grangusis was swept by this gaze, and he couldn't help but get goosebumps all over his body, and the dragon scales on his body opened slightly. Is it the gaze of His Majesty Bahamut? Grangusis asked uncertainly, because of the emotions contained in the gaze and the feeling that came from the blood and made the dragon tremble with fear. Longen nodded and gave an affirmative answer. Isn't it written in the contract? Grangusis was stunned and opened his mouth wide. Who would have thought that you, a 5-color blue dragon, would ask the metal dragon god to be a witness when signing a contract with the white dragon? Longen looked at Galangsis's uncomfortable look, smiled, and told it a more explosive news. I'm the favorite of the Platinum Dragon God, so of course I asked the Platinum Dragon God to be a witness. Galangsis stared at Longen's exposed silver scales, not knowing what to say for a moment. 5-colored dragons who become the favorite of the Platinum Dragon God will be punished by His Majesty Shyamut. Countless powerful 5-colored dragons who believe in His Majesty Shyamut, or dislike betrayers, will flock to him under his oracle until they kill this traitor who shames all 5-colored dragons. And Galangsis, the white dragon who signed a contract with the betrayer to become the guard of the dragon's nest, will also be easily dealt with by the powerful 5-colored dragons who came. Due to the existence of the contract, it cannot even take the initiative to report to His Majesty Shyamut. Galangsis suddenly felt that his future life as a dragon was bleak. Don't be so pessimistic, Longen smiled. As long as no one knows that I'm the follower of the Platinum Dragon God, no one will come to me, right? That's right. So your first task is to help me cover up my identity as the follower of the Platinum Dragon God. Longen grinned and took out a bunch of blue magic die from the storage ring. Chapter 69. Blue Dragon. Viscount Kefler Duke sat on a high-backed chair, shaking his treasured ruby wine that had been stored for 16 years. Facing the French windows, he looked out at the knights, who had assembled in the territory and were heading out to support the Grand Duke of the North. Grand Duke of the North was a nickname given by the nobles of the northern fiefdom of Balan to Cliven Gog, the son of Ziwan Gog. The young Grand Duke of the North inherited his father's cruelty and lack of bottom line, and was more ambitious than his father, but he was still too young. In the eyes of the old nobles, he was more like a cave lion cub waving his claws randomly. There was deterrence, but not much. The main reason why the nobles of the Northern Territory chose to side with him instead of the prince from Leamington was that Cliven also inherited his father's army and the contract of his father's sale of territory, using territory as an exchange to get help from the army of the Kingdom of Fassi. Well, this was very shameful for a candidate for the position of Grand Duke, but it could not be denied that it was indeed effective. Since the expeditionary army of the Kingdom of Fassi crossed the border between the two countries and rushed to the front line of the war between the north and the capital, they have pushed the front line to the Great Plain of Batiran. The capital is right in front of them, and victory is just around the corner. As for the plunder and chaos caused by the expeditionary army of the Kingdom of Fassi, it is always the same for the guest army, and it is inevitable. The unlucky ones are the knights and barons who are not smart enough. Those barbaric Fassi people dare not act recklessly against a viscount with a prominent reputation like him. This cannot be covered up by the ridiculous excuse of refugees attacking the nobles. What's more, his continuous donation of food and recruited soldiers have left a deep and good impression on the Grand Duke of the North, and his life safety has been well guaranteed. In the near future, when Cliven truly succeeds the Grand Duke of Batiran, the Duke family's viscountship, that has been maintained for more than 400 years, will become an earldom, and he will become the first Earl of the family. Earl Duke Kefler I is really great. Viscount Kefla brought the goblet to his lips, intoxicatedly taking a deep breath of the sweet aroma of the red wine, and intoxicated in the beautiful fantasy. Just as Viscount Kefla's lips touched the goblet, a blue figure appeared in the distant sky. The figure quickly grew larger in his field of vision, allowing Viscount Kefla, who had the strength of a 5th level knight, to see its appearance clearly. Dragon? Bang! A 16-meter long blue real dragon fell from the sky and hit heavily in front of the castle, where Viscount Kefla was. The real dragon raised its head, approached Viscount Kefla in front of the French window, and opened its ferocious huge mouth. Roar. The sound wave was like a physical object that shattered the expensive glass window, and the glass fragments were blown towards Viscount Kefla with the real dragon's saliva and warm air. Viscount Kefla sat in a daze on the high-backed chair, his legs shaking uncontrollably. It's true that he's a 5th level knight, but his knightly strength has always been used for hunting and in bed. Where has he ever seen such a scene? Ta 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 ta. Viscount Kefla's teeth kept trembling, and he maintained the dignity of a nobleman, and used his stiff and shaking hands to put the swaying red wine into his mouth. Respected real dragon. Kefla felt his bladder swell when he was stared at. You, what do you want? Ahem. Grangusus cleared his throat, grinned like Long N, showing his fangs, and smiled. Don't panic, human. As you can see, I'm a lawful blue dragon. Viscount Kefla looked Grangusus up and down. Although this real dragon looked strange and the color of its scales was a bit strange, it was indeed blue. My name is Long N, Lord of Storm Mountain, the Great Lord of Thunder. Have you ever heard of my name? Long N's appearance and name were brought along by those nobles who fled the royal capital to serve the son of Zuangaeog. The nobles in the northern border also heard a little about the Platinum Dragon God's followers. Viscount Kefla nodded quickly. Respected Lord of Storms, great blessed one of the Platinum Dragon God, your name resounds throughout Unia, and everyone knows your name. Really? Galangsus's ferocious smile gradually became perverted. In that case, then I guess you wouldn't mind doing me a little favor, right? Viscount Kefla wanted to say no, but for the sake of his own life, he could only squeeze out a smile that was uglier than crying and said, of course. Galangsus imitated Long N and nodded pretentiously. My dragon nest is just short of some gold coins for paving the floor and gems for decoration. Please lend me 100,000. 300,000 gold coins. Viscount Kefla couldn't hold it anymore. Respected Lord of Storms, I don't have so many gold coins. Then how much can you take out? 30,000 gold coins. HMM. Galangsus snorted coldly, staring at Viscount Kefla with dissatisfaction. You are disrespecting the Great Lord of Storms and the Blessed One of the Platinum Dragon God. Viscount Kefla quickly changed his words. 80,000 gold coins. Boom. Grangusus slightly activated the lightning staff that Long N had lent him, and that he had hidden in his mouth, and released the lightning spell. A thick lightning bolt struck the open space next to the castle, scorching the ground. Viscount Kefla was about to urinate. 114,000. 114,000. Plus a box of gems. Grangusus nodded with satisfaction, and then pointed to the golden candlestick on the long table behind Viscount Kefla. That one is also made of gold, right? Lend it to me too. Viscount Kefla's face turned green, but he could only smile and nod as Grangusus said. Grangusus put all the gold coins and gems into the storage ring, flapped his wings, and prepared to leave, but saw Viscount Kefla looking at him eagerly. HMM. You still want an IOU? Don't you believe in the reputation of the Lord of Storms, the Platinum Dragon God's blessed one? Viscount Kefla cursed the Lord of Storms, Long N, in his heart 1,000 times. It was hard to tell whether he was crying or laughing on his face. He kept saying, I dare not, I dare not. Only then did Galangsus raise his neck with satisfaction and hum. With some resentment towards Long N, Galangsus lifted his dragon tail and pulled out a pile of dragon fesses, saying, I won't lend it to you for nothing. Just consider it as the interest on the loan. The fesses of a real dragon are indeed materials needed in some rituals or potions. This pile of fesses of Galangsus can be sold for at least 1,000 gold coins, but Viscount Kefla couldn't laugh. Galangsus waved his dragon wings, and the wind whistled, blowing the stench of dragon fesses to every corner around the castle. Galanxus looked at his masterpiece in front of him, thinking that he was ruining Long N's reputation, so he laughed wildly and flew away. Ha 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 ha. Galanxus chose a direction and flew towards the next victim. Thank you Beechin and Feng for the 5,000 points. I've never seen so much money before. Thank you Yunju and Ionshu for the 17 recommendation tickets every day. Where do so many tickets come from? Thank you to the other bosses for the rewards and tickets. I kowtow to you all here. Bang, 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 withering. Chapter 70 Departure. In the dim dragon's nest, the shiny sapphire-like dragon scales, as if cut and polished, reflected the swaying firelight, making the blue real dragon lying on a pile of gold coins look like a huge and exquisite sapphire sculpture. Long raised his head and looked at the blue-dyed Galanxus who walked into the cave. Long, I have completed your task. Galanxus handed over several storage rings to Long. Because of the contract between them, Galanxus could not hide the loot privately. But Long promised to give him 1/10 of the gold coins, which gave Galanxus the motivation to work. Long's mental power swept through several storage rings, and after dividing Galanxus's share, all the gold coins and gems, as well as a pile of messy gold and silver ornaments and handicrafts, as well as magic armor and weapons, that Galanxus had robbed, fell to the ground. These gold coins were more than the rewards Long received from Ryan and Miss F, making the pile of gold coins under Long twice as large. Following Long's orders, Galanxus ran to the north to plunder human nobles. 2 viscounts, 7 barons, and several knights were unlucky. There were 380,000 gold coins in total, plus gems and various miscellaneous items. The total value should be around 430,000 gold coins. Long helped Galanxus to round off the amount and generously gave him 40,000 gold coins. After receiving the storage ring with a few thousand gold coins missing, Galanxus had another grudge against Long, and then immediately shifted his attention, and excitedly put the storage ring away. 40,000 gold coins were enough to cover a thin layer. For Galanxus, who had lived in the sparsely populated, snow-covered mountains for more than 80 years, he had never been so rich in his life. Give it to me. Long looked at Galanxus and said. Galanxus asked as if he didn't know what Long N was talking about. Ah, what? What do you want? Don't play dumb. It's my lightning staff. Galanxus smiled awkwardly, but still opened his mouth obediently, and took out the lightning staff with his tongue. Long N cast several spells on the lightning staff with disdain, cleaned the saliva on it, and then picked up the lightning staff, and put it into the storage ring. Can't you change your bad habit of putting everything in your mouth? Waving the tip of his tail, Long N signaled Galanxus to leave. Hurry up and wash off this paint. The nobles in the north should be ready now. You don't have to go out like this for the time being. After Galanxus left, Long N summoned Kino, Sorter, Goldenfoot, Blueear, Scar and Copperhammer. Great Master, Lord of Storm Mountain, Lord of Thunder, your servants are waiting for your orders. Long looked at Copperhammer, who did not kneel like Blueears and other clansmen, and asked, can the production of armor and weapons reach the predetermined target? Copperhammer nodded, but pulled his beard in some confusion. Ah, respected Lord Long, dwarves always keep their promises. For your orders, our good guys work in the forge from morning to night every day, but wine, you know, dwarves without alcohol, are like shriveled eggs, always a little uninterested. Long indicated that he understood, and turned to ask, how is the thing I asked you to try? Iron tube cannon? A sample has been made, and the test firing effect is good, but there are still some problems with the formula of gunpowder. Long nodded, and said, adjust the cannon well, and the alcohol you need will be in place soon. Blueears, who was kneeling on the ground, crawled forward a few steps. After the population growth in Blackrock Town and the territory, according to the food reserves and production, how long will the food last? Great Master, there are too many new people in the territory, and our food can't last until the next potato harvest. During this period, Blueear has been in contact with Glengo to deal with the food dispatch issues in Blackrock Town and the territory. The gathered clansmen and refugees consume a lot of food. Even if the territory is also producing at the same time, it still can't keep up with the speed of consumption. Long N looked at Sorter, Kana and Jinjiro. Did you hear that? It seems we need to borrow some food from our neighbors. Sorter, Kana, each of you leads your own available warriors. cooperates with Jinjio's dragon vein dog-headed army, obeys Scar's command, and launches an attack on the target. Long N threw out a map of the Boran West Territory and pointed his finger at the territories of several nobles near the North Territory. It was not far from Blackrock Town, only 2 viscounts separated it, and it had long been looted by the expeditionary army of the Kingdom of Facity, and the refugees fled in all directions. The nobles had a large amount of food that could not be sold or eaten, and Long N was happy to help them consume the food. Yes, Great Master, the Crazy Horn tribe will crush all enemies according to your will. Sorta clenched his fist and beat his chest. The kneeling Golden Foot raised his head. Great Master, the Kobold tribe is your claws and your teeth. Your will be as unstoppable as thunder. Kano, me too. 2 days later, a team of 500 kobolds, 60 dragon blood minotaur, nearly 100 mutant goblins, and 100 dragon song kobolds gathered in Blackrock Town and marched northeast under the gaze of the people of Blackrock Town. Each of them wore a well-fitting black iron armor, holding flails, maces, and other sophisticated weapons in their hands. These equipments made by the dwarves are of high quality, which has increased the combat effectiveness of the entire army by at least 1 time, making it look like a well-equipped and well-trained elite division. The refugees who had just been accepted and were still in the refugee concentration camp that had just been established in Blackrock Town, working in exchange for food according to the orders of these monsters, looked at these powerful monsters with complicated eyes as they fled in the direction they came from. Under the advanced propaganda of Glengo, all the refugees knew that the purpose of these monsters was to buy or rob the food from the nobles, who were unwilling to give arms to the civilians, and turned them into refugees. As humans, they did not receive the protection of human lords, but suffered more cruel exploitation. On the contrary, when they came to this monster territory, those extremely vicious, cruel, and bloodthirsty monsters took out their limited food to help these refugees. It must be said that it was a great irony. At this moment, most of the refugees were determined to stay here, get along with those monsters, and be the subjects of the real dragon. Glengo smiled as he stood on a building overlooking the refugee camp. He felt that his master would be satisfied with his work. Chapter 71 Collision. As the sky brightened, the clansmen in the territory began their busy day. In the still-dim dragon's nest, Long N sat on the gold coins, with a huge book made of gold in front of him. It still doesn't work. Long N shook his head and put the elemental end back into the storage ring. Since the elemental end of the Lionheart family that he carried with him resonated with another elemental end in the Thousand Islands, Long N returned to the territory and tried twice, but still failed to open the first page. Whether you can open the elemental end seems to have no rigid connection with strength. At the Island Masters Banquet in the Thousand Islands, the weakest person who could open one of the pages was only level 7. Long N used the pads on his dragon claws to stroke the heavy and majestic chamfer at the front of his lower jaw. My strength is not legendary, but I have no problem beating a level 7 or 8 spellcaster. If it is based on strength, I should have been able to open the first page long ago. In addition, the difference in strength between a level 9 spellcaster and a level 9 knight cannot be simply distinguished by level. Generally speaking, unless a melee profession sneak attacks them, the strength that a spellcaster can exert is far stronger than that of melee profession. This is also the reason why the status of spellcasters in this world is far higher than that of melee professionals. So what determines whether or not you can open the end of the element? Long N pondered. Dear. Flawless flew in from outside the cave, staring at Long N's huge real dragon body with starry eyes. Long N stretched out his claws with a headache and blocked Flawless, who was about to stick to him. After returning to the territory from the Thousand Islands, Long N threw this magic scale in Blackstone Town and let her leave on her own. Unexpectedly, this guy was very interested in the human town occupied by the real dragon and stayed in Blackstone Town and refused to leave. She even wanted to play the role of a refugee and let Glengo arrange a job for her. After asking Long for permission, Glengo asked her to cut wood and carry building materials with the refugees. During the boring role of a refugee, Flores ate the potato stew and bread for the refugees for a few days as she wished and received a few silver coins. After quickly losing interest in playing the role of a refugee, Flores went to the dragon's nest, visited the nest of the real dragon, and observed Long's various families. These interesting things made Flores more curious and curious about Long, the unusual blue dragon. Long had been annoyed by Flores for 2 days, and every time he sent her away perfunctorily. After thinking about it, Long felt that this was not a solution, and he had to find a way to make the annoying dragon's magic scale stop bothering him. Extending a claw to push Flores away, Long said, "If you are bored, I think you can try to play the role of the real dragon's agent, the manager of the dragon's nest. I just happen to have an idea for a set of unique and innovative clothes that match this identity. Playing a role that has never been tried before, with a brand new style of clothing. This is a condition that Fallen can't refuse." In Flores's shining eyes, Long began to describe the general appearance of the innovative clothes. The next day, Long looked at Flores, who was dressed in a white shirt and a black hip skirt, wearing black high heels, dressed like an office girl, with her hair tied into a neat bun, and vigorously devoted to the management of the territory. A smile curled up at the corner of his mouth. Under the outline of the office girl's outfit, Flores's beautiful and healthy figure was well proportioned, forming a strong contrast with the serious and dull black and white color scheme. The fine-colored scales on the exposed skin had a strange sense of temptation. It's a pity that there are no stockings. It's still a little lacking in flavor. Long withdrew his gaze from Flores, spread his wings, and flew into the air, looking down at his territory. A large circle of buildings has been built around the dragon's nest, and each family has its own residence. But the construction of the territory is still in full swing. In the planned area, the families are reclaiming more farmland and building more livestock farms. A wide road is still being built in the direction of Blackstone Town in the territory. The construction work has also entered the final stage and will soon connect Long End's two territories. In the far northeast, an army composed of minotaurs, dog-headed men, and goblins is advancing rapidly. A fully armed monster army? Wilder, the commander of the 2nd Legion of the Facity Kingdom Expeditionary Force, listened to the scouts' report and thought there was something wrong with his ears. They were ordered to go to the western border of Borin to disrupt and intercept the troops and supplies of the western nobles who supported the current Grand Duke of Borin to support the front line. So far, the 2nd Legion he led has intercepted and dispersed 7 support troops, but this is the first time he has seen an army composed of monsters. Minotaur, dog-headed man, goblin? Are they also going to support Grand Duke Borin? Wilder rarely joked. Soldier, report the direction and number of the monster army. The scout reported, they are heading northeast, with less than 800 people, and less than 100 threatening minotaurs. According to the direction of the 2nd Legion, they should pass by the group of monsters in a few hours. But Wilder thought about it and ordered, the whole army should adjust the direction of march and surround the group of monsters. Although the purpose of the group of monsters was unclear, it was obviously not a wise choice to let an army that they knew nothing about go to their rear. Wilder wanted to see what those monsters were going to do. The rumbling sound of the army's march quickly disappeared under Wilder's order, showing that the expeditionary force of the Kingdom of Facity was well trained. Riding on a tall horse with the blood of magical creatures, Vidal looked at the monster army that collided with them in the distance. Wilder, who had the strength of a 7th level knight, could see the appearance of those monsters clearly through his enhanced vision. Weak goblins and dog-headed men. These minotaurs seem to be much larger than the common minotaurs. Are they a race with special blood? After watching for a while, Wilder felt a little bored. Those monsters looked no different from other monsters except for their standard armor. Wilder ordered, the 1st and 2nd cavalry squads will encircle them from the left and right, and the whole army will advance to eliminate these bugs. The 2nd Legion of the Kingdom of Facity has 4,000-man infantry squads and 2,000-man light cavalry squads. In Wilder's opinion, it is no pressure to eliminate this group of less than 800 people, most of whom are weak dog-headed men and goblins. He can only barely let his soldiers warm up. But just as the 2 cavalry units surrounded them, he actually saw the monsters quicken their pace and rush straight towards his infantry phalanx. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 72 Crushing. Wilder looked at the monsters that were heading straight for his infantry phalanx and smiled contemptuously. Monsters are monsters, stupid and barbaric. They only know how to rush forward. No intelligent human commander would make such a low-level mistake to attack an infantry phalanx of 4,000 people with less than 800 men, especially when there were two 1,000-man light cavalry units outflanking them. If it were Wilder, he would immediately order his soldiers to form a circle and use long weapons to block the light cavalry, instead of trying to fight the enemy head-on when the numbers were extremely inferior, putting himself in a dangerous situation of being attacked from both sides. Originally, he wanted to capture the leader of the group of monsters and torture them for their purpose, but now it seems that there is no need for this. He doesn't think that there are any of these brainless stupid monsters who can answer his questions, so he ordered, "Pass the order. Crush these stupid monsters, don't leave any alive." The neat infantry phalanx raised their weapons and marched forward, encircling the monster army together with the cavalry. The discipline of the monster army seemed to be extremely bad. The larger minotaurs rushed forward too fast, leaving the dog-headed men and goblins behind, which made Wilder despise them even more. The distance between the infantry phalanx and the minotaurs was rapidly shortened. When there was only 100 meters left, Wilder said, "Crossbow team, aim." Crack. A neat sound of crossbow arrows was heard, and dense crossbow arrows were shot at the tall and easy to target minotaurs. Wilder didn't think that a round of crossbow volleys could solve these big guys, so he ordered, "Spearmen, move forward." The moment he shouted, the crossbow arrows hit the minotaurs who didn't know how to dodge, and most of the crossbow arrows hit the heavy iron armor. The crossbow arrows that could penetrate light armor seemed too weak to face the armor that was heavier than human plate armor, and the collision made a ding-dong metal sound. Only a few crossbow arrows hit the joints or areas not covered by armor. The crossbow arrows did not penetrate the joints of the minotaurs as Wilder had expected, hindering their progress. Instead, they made a dull sound after contacting their skin under the hair, as if they had hit the hard and thick stratum corneum. An unexpected incident, but it will not have any impact on the situation, Wilder thought. The 3-meter-long spears were arranged in 3 rows at different angles, neatly aimed at the minotaurs in front, making the entire phalanx like a prickly hedgehog. The mages in the army began to release group enhancement spells to enhance the speed and strength of the soldiers around them. The light cavalry squad also surrounded the goblins and dog-headed men behind the minotaurs. They were going to kill each other in this group of small monsters that were not even as tall as a horse's leg. Wilder's smile had already appeared in advance. After all, it was not easy to eat fresh beef in such a front line in the enemy's hinterland. These minotaurs appeared just in time. Suddenly, one of the dog-headed men hiding among them had a blood-red line on his face scales. The dog-headed man with a scar on his face roared to the sky. All the dog-headed men who heard the roar waved their weapons with greater strength and speed, and rushed towards the cavalry running towards them. Just before the collision, a noisy and chaotic praise that made people feel dizzy and nauseous sounded. The sound of 100 dragon-praising dog-headed men singing in unison resounded throughout the battlefield, causing the light cavalry detachment gathered in a group to fall into chaos. The horses in front raised their hooves and neighed, and the horses behind could not slow down, and collided directly with the horses in front. Suddenly, people and horses fell to the ground, and the short dog-headed men raised their butcher knives. The dog-headed men who usually looked stupid now opened their big mouths full of fangs, let out a harsh and evil laugh, and flashed a bloodthirsty light in their eyes. They raised their weapons and smashed the knights who fell to the ground due to the collision of horses, and wanted to get up from the ground. The strength of these dog-headed men was beyond Wilder's knowledge of dog-headed men. Their maces hit the knights' helmets, causing the steel helmets to collapse, and blood to flow from the gaps in the helmets. The minotaurs that collided with the spears fearlessly used their bodies to support the spears. The huge force pushed the infantrymen holding the spears back, disrupting the formation in the phalanx. The shieldmen in front of the phalanx raised their shields, and the spearmen behind them found the opportunity to stab the minotaurs. But the minotaurs did not dodge. With a ferocious smile, they raised the giant steel axes in their hands and smashed them in the fearful eyes of the shieldmen, splitting the shields and the shieldmen under the shields in half. The infantry phalanx was quiet for a moment, and then a chaotic roar broke out. Their weapons had no effect on these terrifying big guys. At most, they caused them some minor injuries, but these minotaurs were able to withstand their attacks and split the shieldmen holding shields in half. Wilder watched as a tall minotaur with blood-red hair chopped the soldiers in front of him in half with an axe, leaving only half of his body spraying scarlet blood like a fountain. The splashing blood fell on Wilder's face, awakening him from his trance. There were only a few dozen enemies, but it was these dozens of minotaurs who slaughtered the phalanx of 4,000 people like jackals rushing into a sheepfold. Wilder looked up at the light cavalry squad in the distance, only to see that they were shrouded in large areas of ice and fireballs. Those goblins who turned red or blue were still condensing frost and flames in their hands. A goblin with silver white skin and hair even chased the knights who turned their horses around with a wanton laugh, waving his scimitar to chop the horse's legs. As it moved its hands and feet, lightning struck continuously, taking the lives of soldiers or horses one by one. From the collision between the two sides to the one-sided situation, less than half a minute had passed. Wilder couldn't understand why the situation had suddenly become like this. In just half a minute, the second corps of the Facity Kingdom Expeditionary Force was easily crushed and slaughtered like a newly formed army of recruits, and the death toll reached at least 1/10. The massacre continued. The Second Corps, which had always been known for its well-trained troops, was now rapidly demoralized by the massacre of the Minotaurs, and was only one step away from collapse. Wilder wiped the blood off his face, and turned his horse's head in fear, wanting to escape in advance. He had slaughtered many enemies who were not as strong as the Second Corps. He had seen those enemies fleeing, and knew that the fleeing would only turn into a complete massacre. In order to survive, he could only flee in advance, leaving the fleeing soldiers behind to block the enemy's footsteps. However, just as he turned his horse's head, a dog-headed man covered in golden scales suddenly emerged from the ground and stabbed his warhorse's abdomen with a long knife, cutting a huge hole, and the warhorse's internal organs mixed with blood splashed out. The golden-scaled kobold grabbed Wilder's leg, pulled him off the horse, and then proudly put the long knife to his neck. Chapter 73, recommending books and adding some heat to the boss. Controlling the Dragon of Time has been perfectly completed. The new book of the Bogortha Tang Song Yuan Ming has been released. Emperor Dragon describes an epic chapter of another legendary dragon species besides the Time Dragon. Gravity, electromagnetic force, strong and weak interaction force. The four basic forces are the power I control, my eternal crown, and my immortal throne. Ignorant and foolish things call me a tyrant, but the wise regard me as king. Some people are terrified of me, and some people worship me, and they all submit to me. The gods tremble under my wings, and the worlds are afraid of my roar. The world respects me as the Emperor Dragon of the End. Emperor Dragon Saga, Saga Gatangia Atrex Diablo Nexus Tangeli, Arceus. This book is also known as Controlling the Dragon of Power and Chronicles of the Power Dragon Clan. In addition, this failed author is also a fan of the author of Time Dragon. Friends who like legendary dragons can support it. Chapter 74 War. Oh. Sorter and the others are back. Long N was lying on the gold coins, watching Flores, who was still dressed in a white collar lady style and black stockings, reporting to him, and said happily. Flores, who took over the management of the territory, said with a stack of papyrus documents, yes, they brought back a large amount of food and a group of captives. With Flores's powerful memory as a high-ranking mage, she didn't need those documents recording the development of the territory. The stack of papyrus was a decoration she carried with her at Long End's suggestion. Also, Flores said, I'm a little bored playing this role. Half a month passed, and the novelty quickly wore out. Flores wanted to end this role and devote her energy to the next thing she was interested in. Play when you want to play, and leave when you want to leave. Long N's mouth curled up. You are now a subordinate of the real dragon and the manager of the real dragon's territory. You need the permission of the real dragon to resign, but I reject your request. Long N took out the employment contract that he had coaxed Flores to play his subordinate, and said since you want to play, just follow through to the end, so that Flores, who was fully committed to playing, left her name on the employment contract without any suspicion. It is written in black and white that the labor appointment relationship cannot be unilaterally terminated after signing. Long N smiled. Besides, playing the role of a real dragon's subordinate, following the real dragon, and witnessing the footsteps of the real dragon is a long-term thing. You have only played it for a few days, so you can't appreciate the essence of it. Glancing at Flores with regret, Long N's mood became more and more cheerful. Don't mention resignation for the time being. Take me to see the captives brought back by Sorter first. Long N grabbed Flores' waist and took her to Blackstone Town. A huge and majestic blue figure descended from the sky. Compared to before the departure, the Minotaurs, kobolds, and goblins, who were a little more bloodthirsty, knelt on the ground and praised Long's name. How was the mission completed? Scar, the kobold commander who was ordered to lead this operation, became more calm and steady after experiencing several small wars. There was a cold and wise light in his eyes. He was no longer chaotic and noisy like other kobolds, but he always worshipped and revered Long. He replied in a fluent and woof common language, "My lord, your servant has completed your decree and brought back a total of 1.82 million kilograms of food. Not bad." Long nodded. He ordered Scar to bring back 1 million kilograms of food, which was nearly doubled. Nearly 2 million kilograms of food is enough for the entire territory to eat for a quarter, plus the territory's own production. It is enough to support the territory's agriculture to resume normal production. Long N raised his head and looked at the carriages and carts filled with grain, as well as the thin and timid refugees around them. "My lord, those humans are refugees we recruited to transport grain, after forcing the human nobles to hand over the grain." Long N indicated that he understood and said, "Let Glengo receive them. Now bring the prisoners you captured." "Yes, my lord." Wilder, who was stripped of his magic equipment and armor, was escorted up by 2 dragon-vein kobolds. Wilder, who was exhausted and weak from torture, raised his head and looked up at the majestic blue real dragon. He finally knew that he was defeated by some monster. He had been unable to accept the defeat. When he closed his eyes, he saw the Second Legion being slaughtered by powerful monsters. After knowing that those monsters were the followers of the real dragon, he could finally use the power of the real dragon to paralyze himself and temporarily get out of the shadow of failure. "Who are you?" Long N looked at the human in front of him. Wilder, who had been tortured several times by the dog-headed man along the way, could now tell his identity without any burden. Captain of the 2nd Legion of the Facity Kingdom Expeditionary Force, Wilder Pascal, the second son of Count Pascal of the Facity Kingdom. It turned out that he was a senior official of the Facity Kingdom Expeditionary Force invited by the Northern Rebels. Long N casually asked a few questions about the battle situation between the Northern Rebels and Grand Duke Boran, and Wilder answered them one by one in great cooperation. Only when Long N asked about the situation related to the Facity Kingdom Expeditionary Force did he remain silent. "Let them go to reclaim the wasteland. My territory does not support idle people." Long N was not very interested in this group of Facity Kingdom soldiers. He just thought of them as a group of slaves who could work. When Wilder heard Long N's words, he suddenly said, "Great Lord True Dragon, according to the Noble War regulations, I beg to write a letter to my family to raise ransom for me to redeem myself." Wilder believed that the True Dragon should not refuse gold coins. Long N looked at Wilder and said, "You are just the second son, and you can't even inherit the title. How much ransom can your family pay for you?" Wilder gritted his teeth and said, "Although I can't inherit the family's territory, I'm still a fiefdom baron. The territory is a prosperous commercial town, and the tax alone can earn 20,000 gold coins every year." Long N thought about it and said, "Okay." Wilder breathed a sigh of relief, but then he heard Long N say, "Tell Glengo that this human doesn't have to go to reclaim Wasteland. Arrange some easy work for him, and find someone to keep an eye on him. Don't let my gold coins run away." Wilder wanted to ask Long N what the arrangement meant, but Long N ignored him. He spread his wings and flew into the sky. After circling over Blackstone Town, he flew back to the dragon's nest with the respectful and awe-inspiring praises of his family. Before landing, Long N saw 2 real dragons, one gold and one silver, flying towards the dragon's nest. Long N put Felulis down and waited for the 2 dragons to fly closer. Watching the 2 golden and silver dragons fall to the ground and transform into human forms, Long N smiled and said, "Welcome back to excellent employees." Videlpin rolled his eyes, but Kirelia said seriously, 4 days ago, Balin and the Northern Rebels maintained a standoff. The Eastern rebels suddenly gave up the defense line that blocked the Principality of Leamington and chose to attack southward. The war spread to the southern province of the Principality of Barlin. The Leamington support army has arrived at the Bottilon Plain. The war may have started now. Long'en's eyelids jumped and said, "It seems that the Eastern rebels can no longer hold on. The confrontation between the Northern rebels and the Grand Duke of Barlin has been delayed for too long, so that their idea of overdrawing the entire eastern border to pick up leaks has failed. They can only rely on invading the southern border to plunder resources to maintain the operation of the army. At the same time, it can also allow the Principality of Leamington to intervene, break the confrontation between the Northern rebels and the Grand Duke of Barlin, and force them to start a decisive battle." Long'en narrowed his eyes. "It's a conspiracy to kill two birds with one stone." Long'en thought for a moment and said, "Pass my order to recruit soldiers." Chapter 75 Recruiting. In the open square in the center of the territory, there is a 3-meter high dragon statue, which depicts Long sitting and looking down. It is silent but majestic, which makes people feel awed by the stone statue and dare not look at it. This square usually only has those clans who love art and are good at singing and dancing, such as spotted cat people and centaurs. They often play harps, recorders and a 3-stringed instrument called catata in the square after a busy day of work to express their gratitude for the fulfilling and safe life now. Warlike races such as gnarls and tiger people often avoid this place. They hate to hear those weak guys singing praises of a peaceful life. After finishing their work, they prefer to go to the tavern built by the Lord for the dwarves and use the strange smelling water called wine to vent their excess energy. But today, this square is full of a large group of gnarls, tiger people, bear people and other clans. They all pricked up their ears and listened to a dog-headed man loudly reading the conscription order issued by their master Long. Generally speaking, the followers of a true dragon are all its soldiers. When it needs it, all the followers must fight for it at the command of a single order, but Long'en's order is to let them join the army voluntarily. For the warlike followers, the voluntary part is directly ignored by them. Since becoming Long'en's followers, although they only need to work every day to get food and a few copper coins that can be used to exchange for food, such a life is obviously suppressing their aggressive and fighting nature. They dare not disobey Long'en's orders, but after being suppressed for a long time, fights will occur from time to time. For the mental health of these warlike people, Long'en did not completely prohibit fighting, but only ordered that both parties must agree to have a fair duel without destroying the territory's property, hurting others, or endangering their lives. The conscription order issued by Long'en is tantamount to providing these warlike and bloodthirsty guys with a new place to go, an opportunity to get rid of this boring life. A large number of jackals, tigers, and bears lined up, waiting to leave their names on the registration list. The line stretched out for hundreds of meters, and some people even fought to cut in line. All this was within Long'en's expectations. He didn't need to force all his clansmen to fight for him. In that case, the army of various clans mixed together would only be a group of loose sand that barely gathered together. It seemed to have a large number of people, but in fact it would break at the touch. It would be better to let those guys who were eager for war to form and train a real army with a reduced number of people, but high fighting spirit. What Long'en needs is a sharp knife force that can tear the enemy apart, not a bloated and weak army. In the team mostly composed of jackals, bears, and tigers, a female spotted cat stretched her neck to look ahead, counting how many people there were and how long it would take before it was her turn. Delidis, come back with me. This is not the place for you. The middle-aged spotted cat with white hair grabbed Delidis's hand and was about to pull her out of the queue. Uncle Kakashimi. Delidis was not paying attention and was dragged out by the stronger middle-aged tabby cat man Kakashimi. What are you doing here? You want to sign up too? Kakashimi frowned and questioned the young tabby cat man Delidis. Do you know what you are going to do after signing up? You are going to participate in the war. It's not a small fight like the tabby cats biting each other's fur. It's a war that is more dangerous than the previous battle with the jackals. Kakashimi's words attracted unfriendly looks from the surrounding jackals and low canine growls. Kakashimi stared at Delidis. His pupils were so excited that they stood up into a thin line, and the beard on his lips was raised high. The Lord asked us to sign up voluntarily because he didn't want the clan members who are not good at fighting to participate in the war. What do you think you can do? You are not even as strong as a human. You can't even wear armor. Although she had listened to Kakashima's teachings since she was a child so that she could grow up to the age of 19 without any danger, Delidus only wanted to follow her own wishes this time. Delidus turned her head away and said, "No, I have asked the humans in Blackstone Town. Wars need scouts. Scouts must run fast and hide. I'm best at this. The Lord's army also needs scouts. I can be useful in the war. The Lord has given the tribe a safe life. Aunt Milou and little Percy are not starving to death, and everyone can live a good life. Now the Lord needs us, and we must repay the Lord. This is what you taught us when we were young." Kakashima listened to Delidus's contradiction and bared his teeth in anger, and the hair on his neck exploded. War kills people. Far more people died than the tribe has in 200 years. Your parents gave you to me. I can't let you die. Come back with me. When Delidus heard the word parents, her ears and whiskers drooped softly, but she still lowered her head stubbornly and refused to move. Kakashima felt powerless for the first time when facing this little girl who he had watched grow up and was so stubborn in front of him. She was already an adult tabby cat person, and she had enough ability to bear the consequences of her own choices. His discipline was more like useless nagging to her and the other young tabby cat people. Kakashima sighed, his erect whiskers fell down, and without looking at Delidus, he turned and left the queue. Delidus saw Kakashima going away and wanted to get back to the previous queue position, but she walked to the end of the queue silently under the unfriendly gaze of a strong and tall tiger man who was originally behind her. Delidus, who was slowly advancing with the team, recalled Kakashima's slightly bowed back and couldn't help but feel a little regretful. She felt that her attitude should be softer, at least it wouldn't hurt Uncle Kakashima's heart too much. But I must join the army. I want to fight for the Lord. Only in this way can I repay the Lord's kindness. Just as Delidus clenched her furry fists to cheer herself up, several tall and thin figures stood behind her. The familiar smell made Delidus turn around hurriedly. Behind her stood several familiar tribesmen, led by Kakashima, whose hair had already turned white. Uncle Kakashima. Kakashima's face was cold, and his beard was shaking up and down. "You all want to go? I might as well go with you, so that you young guys won't ruin the Lord's business." Uncle Kakashima. Delidus's furry tail swayed from side to side with joy. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.